To the Lakeville Area Schools School Board meeting this February 10th, 2026 at 6 p.m. This is a work session tonight. And with that, I'll start with a roll call, and we'll start to my left and go around.
Tracy Brogle, Director of Technology.
Paul Carbone.
It's Brenda Albrecht.
What? This is okay.
It's fine.
Executive Director of
Oh, you got your title right? I didn't even know this. Sorry. Okay. All
I
right.
noticed and I was like,
Tracy, we'll give you a promotion tonight, right
Okay,
now.
thanks.
All right.
what changed? I was away for a half hour today.
All right, go ahead, Brenda.
Brenda Albrecht, Administrative Services.
Michelle Humphrey, Executive Director of Student Services.
Kim Baker.
Lucas Yoho, Executive Director of Operations.
Carly Anderson, School Board.
Matt Swanson.
I'm Bill Holmgren, Executive Director of Business Services.
Tony Reichenberg.
And Michael Bauman.
Amber Cameron, and then our guest over there. Is that okay? Kristen.
Rizak, Director of Student Nutrition. Nicole Adams, Director of Integrated Continuous Improvement.
Jamie Utch, Monterey Achievement and Integration Coordinator.
Great. Well, thanks for being here tonight, everybody. And then in the audience, are you all from the same troop? Yeah? What troop are you all from?
All Saints 260.
Oh, nice. Welcome. Thanks for attending tonight. For the record, because I don't think everyone can see on, we have a Scouts troop from All Saints here as part of their merit badges, right? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. Well, with that, we'll start with policy review. So just I think a new procedure with policy that we'd like to discuss tonight is we're feeling like, based on last week's conversation and other conversations, that this like two-step with the policy committee hasn't been the most effective way for the board to maybe review policy. And so making a recommendation tonight to the board where we would sunset the policy committee and have review of policy happen at the table, so all 7 members would see edited policy together rather than doing it twice, which has kind of been the MO for a while. So are there any objections to doing it that way?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess like my only concern is that even if we continue to do it this way, it's like we get stuck in these lengthy discussions about the policy, and not that those are bad. It's just that we were supposed to finish going through all the policies in 3 years. And it's been 3 years and we're not done.
Yep.
As far as just like updating them.
Yep.
So I'm wondering if we could allow, like, we had been at one time just having the district do like updating the policies, and then they just came through on the consent agenda, and we just knew that those were just updating to statute, right? Can we do something like that so that the district is working on going through those that just need updated, and then if the board has like ones that they want to look at and more discussion about it, that's fine, but can we at least get things updated? Like, that's what my concern is.
Yeah, thanks. And I think before we launch into the actual policies, I'm interested in having a conversation about what are our policy goals for the next year and what do we want to try to accomplish. So that, I think that fits with that potentially. I know we've talked about this before at our board, but just as a review, so MSBA did an audit of all of our policies and returned the policy audit to us in June of 2025. And they recommended that we go through like a 3-stage process. So they grouped it into mandatory policies that we need to address in terms of edits. Some of them are more minor, some are more substantial changes. There's 39 policies that fall in that bucket. The second stage is legal, and so still suggested policies that have legal ramifications for the district. And even if we don't update those, we're still obligated to follow the legal legal precedent that's been set by state statute. And so with that category, which is that second stage, as I mentioned, there's 54 policies. And then in the last stage, the third stage, is the recommended policies, and there's about 50 of those that MSBA has recommended that we look at editing. And so MSBA has made the recommendation through that audit letter that if we have inconsistencies between our school district policy and the MSBA policy, that the board would be encouraged to adopt the MSBA language. If there's changes that we'd like to make that alter kind of the intention of the policy, then it's strongly recommended that our attorneys would get involved in any edits beyond what MSBA is offering, because MSBA has already gone through like the legal review for all of the policies, and that's what they've sent to us through the audit. And so before we launch into the policies from our first reading from last meeting, maybe extending on Kim's points, what are the goals of our policy work for this next year? Do we want to try to work through and get compliant as many policies as we can? Are we interested in a slower approach where we would tackle one a month? Because that's about what the track that we're on right now is, about one a month. And that could be satisfactory to the board. But I'm curious to hear from board members and from Superintendent Baumann, like what would be the preferred course of action in order to get us in compliance with all of our policies? Any thoughts on that?
My thoughts are I'd love to get us in compliance first, because that's administration. We've been trying to get there for a while. I think we do have a comprehensive audit that anybody could review in whatever detail that they want to, but I think starting with compliance is a good first step for policy goal. I'd make that the first goal.
So to clarify, that would be pushing policies through the consent agenda that have minor edits to get in compliance with MSBA's recommendations.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
How do other board members feel about that?
I
Sorry, I feel like everyone's on this
would
side.
appreciate that, because one a month is not going to get us there.
Anyway,
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the minor edits to update the current policies would help streamline the whole entire process. And if we want to come back and revisit something at a later date to consider a more overall, more thorough, reconsideration of it, we can do that then. But just getting things up to date seems to be the minimum we should be at, and we're not there yet. And I think we need to get there first.
Matt or Paul, do you have thoughts?
My only thought is, because things have a tendency to flow, as you all well know, and it probably would be a good idea to give ourselves a deadline date for each. So these three by this, these three by this, these three by this, and literally put a schedule together so that we can try as best we can to stay on schedule. Because again, and it's no fault of anybody, but sometimes things have a tendency to float out a little farther than they should.
Right, yeah. Okay. Matt, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think the policy audit chart helps a lot. I wouldn't mind involving the district if they have a preference as far as how we tackle those priority-wise, because some of the edits, they might recommend a lot of edits, but they might not have any real significant effect on the policy.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think we're out of compliance as much as it sounds by the number of recommended edits that they have. But yeah, obviously it's better to have gone through them than not update them.
So would people feel comfortable having the district, Brenda in particular, shepherd this process, whereby you would create maybe a schedule for Paul's comment and decide, at this board meeting we can bring 3 forward, or however it makes sense given the extensiveness of the edits. And I think they could, if board members agree, what I'm hearing Superintendent Baumann say and others is that they could be put in consent agenda if they're not substantial changes. But then if they are substantial, they should not go in consent then. They should be part of discussion for first and second reading. Is that a plan?
Yep.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah, go
I just
ahead.
want to make sure, because I think part of the challenge is that individual board members may have policies that they think warrant or do not warrant kind of more specific analysis from the board. And so perhaps it can, I don't know how we identify policies. What I want to try to avoid is maybe pulling things from a consent agenda and spending kind of a lot of time discussing those and then we have to bring it back for readings. And so, Brenda, do you think there's a pile that, or can we go along with the MSB recommendations about ones that just need those edits versus, could that be the plan?
Yeah, if, I'm gonna be really honest.
Yeah.
I think that, yes, there are probably a number of them that have very minimal edits, that could be put on the consent agenda and moved through rather quickly. And I have heard us say of more than once that that's what we would like to do. But when those policies are then put on the consent agenda and they're pulled, we're looking at all of the language rather than just the recommended changes.
Right.
And that's where we're getting caught up, is that we start going through all of the language and why this and let's change that. And then it's taking weeks, if not months, to get a policy done. So if we are truly putting them on the consent agenda and just this time through, just looking at what the recommended changes are, just to get them all up to date, I think that we can do that rather quickly.
That's what I would hope, like, the board is together on that, because I think if everybody's not on the same page there, then we're gonna be spinning the wheels with the progress, so.
Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, I think to that point, we could just send out a list, ahead of time with the recommended changes. So at the beginning of the month, like, hey, these are the ones we're going to look at. Any of these, with the expectation that board members would actually review them and then let the chair know, like, hey, I'd like to spend some further time discussing this one. So then it's not a surprise if it gets pulled from the consent agenda, or it can just be scheduled, for further discussion.
I kind of like that, where he said at the very end, like, if there's one that after it's sent out that people have concerns about, then you put it on for a further discussion at like a work session, but it still goes through on the consent agenda so that we can update the language to be legal, and then we can come back and discuss it later and have more. That was good. I like that.
That's not what I meant, but I like.
Okay. So we'll create a schedule on what policies will come forward. And then at the beginning of each month, you want just the ones for that month, right? To be not all, right?
Yep.
Okay, just the ones for that month. And then maybe Brenda, you would make a recommendation in that document, whether it would be put on consent or first reading.
Yep.
And then if board members want to pull it from the consent, we can do that ahead of time. Okay. Does that, everybody feel comfortable with that, all the board members?
Yes.
And I guess other people too, but in particular board. Okay. So with that, I think how we're interested in moving forward policies that require first reading and a second reading would be to have the first reading at our at a regular meeting, and then at the work session clarify or go over questions or concerns that board members brought up at the first reading, and then the subsequent regular meeting have the second reading for consideration for approval by the board, if that's okay with everyone. So at that, let's start with wellness. Director Rizak, would you want to come up? So as a reminder, this policy, and if you're going to do this, you can take it too, but I don't need to take what you're going to say. But
Oh, no.
that,
Go ahead.
I think as we said at last meeting, that the wellness policy it's quite out of compliance, and that the wellness committee, which is a committee of parents, administrators, district staff, and community members, brought forward this redlined copy for consideration like a year and a half ago or so now. And so we reviewed this copy at our last board meeting. I think some of the questions that came up, and I think all of them almost were from Director Thompson, but if I got that wrong, and I realize he's absent tonight, but was just trying to find out more information about the purpose of the title of the policy, if it should be confined to wellness, or if it could be broader potentially. looking at the information about parents sending meals and snacks and encouraging those to be healthy choices. Information about childhood obesity in this in the document. Also about cultural foods and our desire to try to meet cultural food needs. And then the last one was around food as not using food as rewards. So I don't know if you've had time to think about any of those or have recommendations on why the policy is written would be stronger in your opinion, or if anything should be adjusted based on our conversation from last meeting.
So I looked up what really the law is and what is required for a wellness policy, and it was put in Section 204 of the Healthy Hunger-Free Kids Act in 2010. The local school wellness policy implementation. And so the purpose of a wellness policy is to require at minimum goals for nutrition education, physical activity, other school-based activities that promote school wellness, as well as nutrition guidelines to promote student health and reduce childhood obesity for all foods that are available on the school campus. So those also include goals for nutrition promotion. So that's where I want the focus to be when it comes to this policy, is making sure that we're hitting each of those points, that we're focusing on those positive behaviors, that positive promotion to affect the childhood obesity, the hunger for students, that we are promoting positive
Policy and procedures.
Yes, thank you.
To support those policies, and that it is consistent with the law in the state of Minnesota
Yes.
as it has been
Yes.
given to school districts. And we're pretty much in line with all of the school districts of the metro in that regard. The other part of the policy that I think may be in question around this is the childhood obesity. I don't know if in 2010, I think I wasn't old enough to be reading laws. I was so young. The problem I see from a policy perspective is that is not inconsistent with what has been communicated from the DHS, federal and state, with regard to trying to reduce that. And this is talking about in schools and what we have control of as an education entity and an LEA. So I think all of that aligns with the law, aligns with Minnesota DHS, federal DHS, irrespective of administrations. So I think we're aligned very well with that, if that matters.
And in prepping, the policy committee was involved, right, in prepping these from the last time, and I believe this is the MSBA language as well, so it aligns with that. Considering our conversation from last meeting, are there things about this policy or things from our conversation that other board members have questions on, or that you would like to see Director Rizak kind of give her recommendation on? Okay. Oh yeah, go ahead, Matt.
You might not know this, we did get an email from one of the school nurses kind of in support of the policy and the revisions, so I thought that was very helpful. They shot an email to everybody and
Great.
explained it a little bit more. So.
Okay. Anything else anybody needs before this would come back for a second reading? So I think because it was only one board member, no changes would be made to this copy unless someone wants to see something different. Okay? All right, this will come to the next meeting for review and consideration for approval. The next policy that we reviewed last meeting was the hazing prohibition. I believe there were two things primarily that we wanted to look at. One was under the definitions, it's talk about what contraband means, and it said controlled substances. We were interested in adding the word and paraphernalia, just to catch like, I don't know these things very well, but you know, pipes or the e-cig, but not the actual cartridge. And I'm not well versed in this area. Are people okay with having paraphernalia added?
Sure.
Okay. And then I know there was conversation, both in this policy and also the next one, which are kind of similar around, and that's the search of student lockers, around notification of parents in the event of an investigation or a search. So I believe, Brenda, you were able to connect with our legal attorney about their opinion based on those conversations? Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Would you be willing to fill us in?
Yeah, I can go over what his thoughts and concerns are. He recommended against including language in policy stating that we will notify parents prior to doing any interview with their children for both legal and practical reasons. First, there's no clearly established right in any case law or statute that says we have to notify parents prior to interviewing students. And generally, he advises against creating new rights by policy that aren't rights under statute. If we did this for these two types of investigations, we would likely have to do it for all investigations, or at least would receive pushback on why we give students or parents this right only in limited circumstances and not all circumstances. There is concern for the administrative burden and the delays that this would create in investigations that may be otherwise very quick. For example, administrators can pull students into their office, potentially conduct and complete an investigation in a couple of hours as opposed to the investigation taking days or weeks. Parents could potentially delay investigations or interfere with student safety, and we may need the right to immediately question students regarding the presence of, let's say, weapons or something like that. Regardless of whether or not it's in policy, our administrators still have the discretion to call parents to let them know about the interviews, and will often do this when it's advantageous. So therefore, putting it in the policy may not be necessary because we can do that if we want to do that without it being a policy. So basically, not infringing or further restricting what the district can do under statute, like putting additional language into the policy.
Questions or reflections on that, or things we should consider for? Is it okay to lump the two together, because I feel like it's a very similar issue?
And I think you can put them both together, Amber, because it was about parent or guardian notification, so that's fine. My question would come out of the legal opinion, and Matt, you might have a viewpoint on this too. Where is the intersection, or where is the point in time when a parent truly should be, or a guardian, truly should be notified because something is developing? I get it, there's a suspicion, and let me call you in the office, I want to talk to you for 5 minutes. I don't think you need to call the parent. But the question becomes, I believe, where does it become a legitimate situation where the parent or guardian should be notified? And I don't know if that should be in the policy, or if Michael, it's something that...
Well, I can tell you that procedurally and the protocols in schools, usually the intersection is discretionary for the person who's dealing with the investigation. There's usually an escalation process, so if it's an AP, say, talking to a situation, they're going to talk to the principal.
Right.
Principals typically are going to notify parents if there's something more serious going on. Parents can be allies too, and we don't take a adversarial relationship with that at all. In fact, the opposite is true. The concerns are, I think, as Brenda stated there, is what are we limiting ourselves by doing, and how are we going to be able to continue to operate at a normal clip or pace or whatever for the things that we're doing. But, the intersection, it for sure is if there's disciplinary action that's going to occur. There's an intersection at the severity of the situation, but knowing and having dealt with administrative law and situations that, they're variable, I can give you 5 times it's like this, and the 6 times it's like that.
It's case by case.
It's very case dependent, but I don't think, and I've not gotten pushback from parents saying that they weren't contacted very often. It has happened where a parent has said, hey, I should have known about this. Well, when you peel the onion back, there were some communications. I mean, there's different, again, it's a very case driven scenario, but I think our administrators do a good job of making sure that the parents are brought into the situation, again, because they're typically allies in whatever the situation may be. But if the student goes home and that conversation is going to happen with the parent, the administration doesn't want to be sitting there going, oh, yeah, we didn't do anything about that. And then the parent's calling and saying, you didn't.
Yeah, and I think that was where the discussion went last time.
Yeah.
Where, do you want the student to go home and tell the parents, and the parents go, what just happened today?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a little bit of a dilemma there. And Michael, I agree. Parents aren't always adversarial. Case in point, you think a student has drugs or paraphernalia in their locker, and you search and there's nothing there. That just might mean they're really good at hide and seek. And the parents may want to know and check the bedroom and, wherever else, which would be, assisting the parents to some degree in something the kid shouldn't be doing. So again, I think the question becomes, is there an intersection point where it should be in the policy or not?
Yeah, Matt?
Yeah, I mean, another way to frame it is, at what point does administrative inconvenience outweigh, potential rights of students and parents? On the searches, I mean, legally, they don't have a right to any privacy. We can search their lockers, we can search their desks. If they're bringing their backpacks, there should be an expectation. And so I think it's after the fact, do we notify parents, like, okay, because I'd want to know, like, if my kid's backpack continually gets searched. It's like, well, one, what are you doing, that the teachers want to search your backpack? Are you involved in some suspicious activity? Or is my kid just continually being targeted for searches, But again, I think that's after the fact. So that's on 502. 526, the concern was, and maybe there's delineation here, as the severity of the hazing. If the hazing becomes like, this could be criminal, then I would absolutely want the parents to be notified, before the kid is interviewed, because the kid does have rights. And unfortunately, some kids might not know, like, look, you don't have to answer questions about this, if there's potential legal consequences. And maybe it won't be a lot of situations, but it could be some situations, just depending on what the incident is.
How do you reconcile, what our attorneys advise to not include that versus, what you're saying? I'm just curious,
So there's no consequence, right, to not have it in there, because we don't have to extend those rights. But then the question is, well, when are we disregarding maybe parental rights that they want to be policies of the school, just for the purpose of convenience on the administration side? So, and I agree, we don't want every little thing to be like, oh, we have to notify your parents before we talk to you. But if something is serious, then it should, click a light bulb, hey, this could be a situation where we need parents involved too.
Other thoughts, Carly?
Yeah, I know I said this last time. I just feel like I would probably align with our superintendent in terms of trusting our administrators to handle the situations appropriately. And I feel like I'm only in N of 3 years here on the board, but I've never received any sort of email contact about our administrators not responding appropriately in terms of alerting parents. And so I think we potentially, and Brenda, tell me if I'm wrong, but increase our liability if we start putting things in policy that make a demand for that versus trusting our administrators to make the right decision in the moment, which I feel like if there's potential legal consequences for a student, I would guess the parents are gonna be involved pretty early on for that, would be my assumption. But, so I appreciate what's being said. I just also think they're doing a great job of, we just don't get email traffic on that. Not to say it doesn't happen then, but we're not being notified of any sort of situations.
Also, if I could, students are given a Tennyson warning before they're questioned by administrators. And that Tennyson warning, it tells the student what their rights are, that they don't have to answer questions. If they do answer questions, to answer them truthfully, how the information is used. So they are sort of alerted to what their rights are before an administrator asks them questions. And then I don't mean to put Michael on the spot, but he could probably speak more eloquently to FERPA. There are some instances where we do need to notify parents ahead of time with a FERPA notice. I just had to have a principal do one today. So, like Michael said, every case is different and it depends on the circumstances of that case. But I would caution against putting any language in policy that might get us caught up, right? So if we put that in policy and then an administrator misses making that phone call before we interview a student, I don't want to see us in a situation where the district can't defend itself because we put something in policy that we can't defend.
Kim or Tony, thoughts on this?
I feel like the procedure for when they contact parents is in the handbook. It's pretty clear on when parents are contacted. And I also feel like there should be some left up to administrative discretion on that because it happens a lot during a school day, especially at the secondary level where students are searched. And I think like if we put it in policy that they have to call parents, there would be one dean that would be just calling parents all day for how many times kids are searched.
Tony, you don't have to speak.
Well, I
Come on
mean,
up.
everything's been pretty much said by everybody else. The one thing I would say is allowing the administration discretion and you know the ability to make that decision is pretty helpful. I don't see a problem with putting in a statement in the policy in situations that Matt said, where you know something may have criminally happened. I would defer to the administration anyways that they would actually call the parents at that point anyways. So in that sense, putting something like that in the policy isn't hurting anything. It's basically just putting it in there that this is at this point, this is when we're going to definitely bring in a parent. If everything up until that point, leaving it to the discretion of the administration, I'm perfectly fine with.
Kim brings up
oh no, go ahead.
I was just saying, Kim brings up a good point, and that is because I feel like there's policy and then there's the handbooks or like the procedures that people are expected to follow. So is this pretty well outlined? I haven't looked at this specifically. It's pretty well outlined in procedures, because then I feel like that would balance both the direction we want the administration to take as well as not necessarily increasing our liability as a district in certain situations.
I can't answer that off the top of my head.
Okay.
I would have to actually pull up the handbook
Yeah.
and take a look at it.
Okay, but that might be a good resolution.
Yeah, Matt.
Two things. Just one, I think if you're violating the procedures, you're probably in the same position legally that you are if you're violating the policies. How often, we're saying a lot of kids are searched. How often are we talking about? Like 100 in each high school a day? Like how frequent is it?
Oh, not 100 a day, no. I don't know the stats, but it's not 100 a
Okay.
day.
I can
It's
imagine
usually,
how it
it's
comes
usually
up, but-
event driven,
Sure.
something's going on in the bathroom, somebody reports something to somebody.
And again, I don't fault teachers or administrators from doing it or asking it. I'm just curious how often and like what is the number? You know, are we adding a significant burden to the administration, or are we just assuming it is?
I think where I'm falling is like, our legal counsel has advised against it. And that I'm interested in getting compliant with policy as quickly as possible. And so the version that was sent to us by MSBA is this, you know, edited version. So I think in practice, if our administrators are calling, I mean, I would think, no question, if it becomes criminal, you might not know that it's going to become criminal, though. Hi there. Is there an issue?
No, I work in a high school, so I can share a little bit of somewhat informed expectation of not the amount of searches, but just like the daily number of incidents. Because you said it's event-based.
Okay.
Sure.
Sure.
Just in terms of things that I'm aware of, because there's calls over the radios, we probably have, just for ones called over the radios, probably 5 to 10 bathroom inspections that are called on a day, and mostly during some of the more free times. Yeah, I'd also say 5 to 10 situations where students are clearly trying to evade authority or go in locations where they're not supposed to be. So,
Sure.
if those could potentially be stipulating events.
Great. Okay.
Just for
Thank you.
instance.
Amber, do you want to restate that? Because I bet people didn't pick up on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of what I was saying now, though.
Oh, no, what he was saying.
Oh, I'm blanking on his name for Hayden. Works at the high school and just reported that that there's like 6 to 7 incidents where bathrooms are needed to be searched, and then additional searches happening throughout the day for a variety of things. Is that a good summary? Okay. I guess how would the board like to move forward on either of these related to notification of parents? I think where I was going before Hayden was able to share that was that when you start an investigation, you might not know that it's going to become criminal, or that is as bad as maybe it could be, right? And so it could start off very innocent, a very minor thing that could, by investigation, open up into a big thing. And so I don't think an administrator would always know when that time to call the parent before an interview would start. And so my personal feeling is to err on the side of administrators doing their jobs, completing these investigations in a way that the attorney has recommended, with the expectation that in practice we're calling parents if something significant is happening. That's my personal opinion, though. I don't know if that's what the board as a whole is interested in. I mean, I think I know your stance.
I would share, I would just share that opinion because I feel like we do want to take MSBA policy and look at how that fits with Lakeville. Again, I come back to these, we're not getting a lot of feedback that our policies are not appropriate for what's happening in the schools. We're not getting parent feedback that administrators aren't doing their jobs.
Yeah,
So I don't see a reason to stray from policy
Okay.
by MSBA.
Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Ken, you mentioned that this is already in a procedural handbook. Do you know roughly what it says, or what the terminology is?
The last time it was presented to us was like 2 years ago, so I
Okay.
can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but it did reference alerting parents at certain points in the process, so.
Maybe we'll bring this forward for a vote for consideration, and if the majority of the board feels comfortable with it, we can see how the board lands on approving these or not. Yep.
It might be helpful though for us to figure out what is in the
Yeah, is there any
the handbook.
Procedural thing?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
I can get that question.
Because that
answered.
might resolve, like I said, the concern. If it is pretty well outlined, then I don't see a need to put it in policy.
Okay. Michael, can we have someone get back
I'll
to us
take
on
care
that?
of it.
Thank you.
I would note for, so 526 is hazing. I mean,
Mhm.
it is a limited circumstance. I would assume that an administrator would know, one, is there, underage drinking involved, something that would be criminal, like, has somebody injured somebody else, by an act. If it's just, well, I know we've been copied on some information about other issues that are just maybe less traumatic hazing, that wouldn't rise the level of criminality. But if something's like apparent on its face, I mean, you can kind of tell. You should be able to tell.
Mhm. Do you have any perspective on that? I know you're trying to multitask here. Okay. Should we find out what's in the procedural handbook and
Sure.
see? Okay. Great. Okay.
Are those brought to the next meeting for a final reading?
Yeah, let's do that with information about the handbook.
Do Friday note it.
Yeah, in the Friday notes, possible. Thanks. Okay, next we're going to move to the presentation on the 2026-29 Achievement and Integration Plan update. So welcome Nicole and Jamie to the table. Great,
Hi.
welcome.
Should we just start with some
Yes,
intros?
please, that'd be great.
Okay. I'm Nicole Adams, Director of Integrated Continuous Improvement. If you're wondering what that means, I oversee achievement and integration, MTSS, and data and assessment for the district. And I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Jamie Schumacher, who has been with us since June of 2025. He is our Achievement and Integration Coordinator. He has a strong background in educational research and measurements, and has done a tremendous amount of work on our next iteration of achievement and integration since his start here in June. So we did share everything in advance and did not prepare a formal presentation because we wanted to just be respectful of time. And so at this point, I don't want to reiterate everything that was already shared, so we will just stand for questions that you may have.
Okay, great. So in the Friday notes from Superintendent Baumann, this two-pager was sent, right, with a note that this would be discussed today. So with that, do people have questions or reflections on this? And if anybody, I'm happy to pass this around if anybody wants a copy of this right now. Anybody? Okay.
I'll take it.
Just pass that around to Carly. I only have one, so.
Oh, keep it, you
No,
keep it.
can-
No, you
go
keep
ahead.
it.
You can have it.
I'm pulling it up on my computer.
Oh, okay.
I have it, I saw it in the notes, sometimes I like the physical version.
Do you want to, would you mind maybe going over
Sure.
kind of the focus for the next couple of years?
Sure. Let me start with maybe just providing just a little bit of overview of what achievement and integration requires of us,
Okay.
and then sort of how we are shifting our focus a little bit. So achievement and integration is a program as designed by the state of Minnesota. It's under state statute, and its purpose and intention is to design racial and economic integration, increase student achievement, create educational opportunities, and reduce academic disparities based on students who are coming from diverse racial and economic backgrounds. Up until this year, Lakeville Area Schools has chosen to opt into this program. It has not necessarily been required. However, our demographics have shifted enough that we now meet a threshold where we are required to participate in the Achievement and Integration Program. If you're wondering what that threshold is, roughly speaking, it means, and there's a state formula that the commissioner develops every year and then tells you whether or not you are racially isolated as a school district. For generally what that means, it means that at least one district on your borders, you are 20% more racially diverse than one of those other districts. And so it's a pretty complex formula, but this year we have met that threshold in comparison to some of our border districts. So it's no longer optional. We are required to participate, but the good news is because we have been optionally participating, we were pretty much set and ready to go. There are 3 areas that you are required to build your plan around. One is an achievement goal, and that aims to improve racial or economic disparities, specifically in academic performance. So while I want to point out this plan does have an academic requirement and is a key component of the plan, it is also broader than just academics because it is looking at an integration goal that aims to increase integration and participation of racially and economically marginalized students, and a teacher equity goal, which is aimed to improve equitable practices to support students in schools. So yes, there is an academic component, but it's also focused on a learning environment piece as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Matt.
Before you move on, what exactly does it mean, integration and participation? Like, what does that look like, practically speaking?
Yeah. It means, well, if you look at data, and you feel free to jump in here at any point.
Sure.
When you look at participation in academic programming, or you look at those outcomes, and you're seeing patterns of students who are coming from racial or ethnically marginalized groups or economically marginalized groups, that you are taking intentional efforts to ensure that their participation in outcomes is comparable to their non-marginalized peers.
So I think on the integration goal, there's pretty considerable leverage in terms of what you can choose to focus on. So historically, the last 3 years, we focused on advanced academics and trying to diversify advanced academics. I think we've seen some pretty considerable changes there. The district offers a bunch of examples of things that it encourages you to look at, one of which is disproportionate discipline. And so then when we looked at our disproportionate discipline rates, we saw enough concerning data that that's where we decided for the next 3 years might be a good integration-related goal to focus our attention toward. But you have pretty considerable leeway. I know some districts have had goals or sub-goals that focus on athletic participation, right? You can kind of go in a pretty wide direction on the integration goal.
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, thank you. Is it too premature to ask what kind of results you're getting? I mean, what are the things you're trying to do? And I understand how you're trying to move the needle accordingly for certain populations.
Sure.
But, I mean, is it too early to say it's successful, it's not, it's
Well, this is a
neutral?
new plan that will be implemented starting next year, so yes.
But there hasn't been any.
For the old plan,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think it was was it October or November? There was a report sent to the board that was kind of like detailing where we are succeeding and where we're falling short based on the old plan. And so what I tried to do with that, if I mean, we could bring that up and discuss it in more detail if you'd like, is to say that, so the state requires very simple goals. It has to say, like, you have decreased the margin as it relates to graduation rates between, say, your white population and your Latino population by X percent. And what I tried to do when I presented that was to say, well, in the simple way that the goal is required that we report, it looks like we're making a ton of progress. When we look at our data, it's more complicated than that because we're seeing increased rates of graduation with some groups and decreasing rates with other groups, right? And so, like, for instance, our net graduation rate among our white males has been going down over the last 3 years. It's been holding steady with our Black and Latino males. It's been increasing with our Black and Latino female, right? So essentially what I was trying to say in that report is that the simplistic answer is, like, we're making progress. And I think our metrics show that. The more complex answer is that there's a lot more nuanced work that we have ahead of us.
So when you disaggregate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that the way that we are required by the state to write the goals doesn't necessitate disaggregated data in a way that is, as a data scientist myself, I struggle with because it makes it really easy to hide or not hide what you're trying to accomplish. And so I tried to offer a bit more of a nuanced perspective for you all.
Yeah, Matt.
I was just wondering, because it looks like we're spending about $1.9 million annually on the plan, and there are a number of different components of it. From a data scientist standpoint, how do you test, which portions of the plan are actually being effective at achieving the goal or moving us forward, and which ones are not?
Yeah, well, so we've done a variety of things since I came on board. I can't necessarily speak to everything that was done before the last 6 months. But I have devoted pretty much, I would say 80% of my time since I came on board trying to get my head around exactly that. So for me, it's been everything from qualitative data collection, where I've met with building leadership in every single building, and I've had just asked them, like, what do you think is working, what do you think is not working when it comes to the Achievement Integration Plan and the way we've spent our money, the way that you've seen the resources used. We've also run, like for instance with Young Scholars, we ran both a qualitative and quantitative analysis of the effectiveness of the program. We're able to see a lot of effectiveness in the program, and so we're trying to figure out how we can sustain it long term and not just in this budget that we know exists right now, but we can't guarantee in the long term will exist. So what do we do with Young Scholars long term? So it's been a pretty varied approach that has included both some quantitative analysis and some qualitative analysis. We were just discussing earlier today that moving forward with things like the fast bridge reading scores that we're proposing using for our achievement goal in the next round, which is also something we used in the last round. We'd like to see some more inferential statistics and not just descriptive statistics. So not just like this percentage of our students is meeting a threshold or not, but actually some sort of longitudinal analysis that says across the threshold of all of our students, are we seeing trends in the right direction, not just thresholds where your thresholds could be hiding,
Can I just a
certain,
quick follow-up?
certain realities.
So are you tracking individual students then too, in order to determine whether or not the interventions, because some of these things like elementary reading interventionists,
Yes.
that seems like it'd be pretty easy to track. You've got
Yes.
the before, the intervention, the after.
Yep. So like that's, for instance, with Young Scholars, that's what we did. We downloaded a very large data set of every one of the students that have been impacted by Young Scholars, and we ran some longitudinal quantitative analysis on whether or not it was having the intended impact. For the reading interventionists, they've only been fully implemented since the beginning of this year, so we don't have enough data yet, but my intent as somebody who values that sort of inquiry would be, yes, we're doing that kind of analysis. I always caution with that analysis because, within measurement, you want to caution saying that this one thing caused this one outcome, because it's never that simple in human subjects research. But I think as much as possible, trying to get a better sense of what is the impact of what we're doing is important to me, knowing that we have a lot of work to do when it comes to meeting the needs of our most marginalized kids in our district.
Can you talk about, and I feel like Nicole, sorry, you got cut off. If you
No,
wanted
Yeah,
to
yeah,
go
go
no,
ahead.
it's fine. No, when it comes to the data
Yep.
analysis part,
Okay.
that's it.
I'm curious, like, given the work that you've been doing on evaluating the program, can you talk about the evolution to this new plan and how you landed on these areas of work?
Yeah, and Heather,
then,
did you want to speak
and then
to it
can
at
you
all?
remind
Or jump in?
me and the
Yeah.
board what you need us to do in relation
Sure.
to this plan?
So I'm gonna create a little overview, and then I'm gonna let Jamie talk about the actual process, and then I will also address your piece of it. So in hiring Jamie, we knew that this new plan was coming due. So over last year, we had been working on the plan that we inherited and making a few minor adjustments along the way. But we knew that we wanted to make sure that this plan was more intentionally integrated within existing systems. So that's why you're seeing some of these components coming alongside teaching and learning. So while it is not a teaching and learning plan, it does support the work of teaching and learning. While it is not a student services plan, it does come alongside and support the work of student services because equity is everywhere. And needs to be systemic. So we are really trying to make sure that we're embedding as much into direct student services in the systems that currently exist to try to bolster those systems.
Which is an efficiency in the fact that we don't have a lot of resource and vast capacity. So it has to be that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I'll turn this over to Jamie in just a moment. He can talk a little bit about how we determined
landed here.
the pieces. What we will need from you is this will be on your February 24th vote. We do need a vote on it, and then we need your signature before we submit it to the state on March 15th.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I'll just say separately that I know Brian had some questions about the budget. We're more than happy to talk in those specifics. We weren't sure how much into the weeds you wanted to get, but I did also share just at the beginning of when we started talking with you, Amber, just a very basic breakdown of the budget that gets into sort of what percentage are we spending on liaisons as opposed to reading interventionists, as opposed, right? Just so that, because when you get into in the weeds budget, it's many tabs of spreadsheet that you might not want to sort through. You're welcome to if you want to, but the more simplified version hopefully can help you get your heads around it before the vote, just so you know. But in terms of how we came to the goals, so one of the things that we found with the outgoing plan is that the primary metric that we were looking at was graduation rates, which is fine. It's not a bad metric. And the secondary metric we were using was reading scores. The problem with graduation rates is it is a one-time piece of data at the end of a 4-year period that's very, very hard to determine what is impacting them. Whereas with reading scores, there's a lot more data that you can use to determine what's moving the metric. We also collect data 3 times a year at multiple grade levels on reading scores. So we decided to sort of sunset the focus on graduation rates, not to say that we shouldn't be focusing on graduation rates, but that it doesn't give us a ton of information. So instead, we're focusing more specifically on the reading scores, continuing to invest in the interventionists, knowing that we now have reading intervention. We are paying for 3 of them in A&I, but there are 9 of them, so that we have them at each elementary building. And I know that there's a hope that I've heard articulated from our middle school principals to expand into similar work for our middle schoolers. And in the data collection, in meeting sort of with some of the important decision makers throughout the district, one of the most important things that I was hearing over and over again is, and including from our student services colleagues, is a need for support as it relates to our EL student population in 2 ways. And that's one of the things that we're putting new energy toward that wasn't in the previous plan that we think will impact our reading scores. The first is some better coaching for our general ed teachers on what it looks like to meet tier 1 needs of EL students. And that can relate not only to reading, although we think reading is one of the most acute ways that is showing up, but that would be true in math, that would be true in science and other areas. And so in these coordinator positions, they would be working, we would have one at the elementary level and one at the secondary level. Half of their focus would be on supporting tier 1 instruction with your general ed teachers, and half of their focus would be on helping coach our EL teachers on co-teaching. Mainly because many of our EL teachers are like, I learned about it in my training, but the actual practice of co-teaching in our district is really hard to make happen. And so that is really because through a lot of what we were hearing and what we're seeing in our data, as well as from reports that we've gotten from the state, is that our lowest hanging fruit and our most acute, you might call it pain point when it comes to equity in the district, is with regard to the gap between our EL students and our non-EL students in academic achievement. So I would argue that where we can see some of the largest return on investment would be trying to support the reading and the math, et cetera, of our EL students. And we're focusing on reading because that's the area where we have the most robust data available to us. But we could have probably similarly seen an output with regard to our math with the type of intervention that we've decided to invest in. So that's the integration one. I'll pause there before I talk about, the achievement one, before I talk about the integration or the teacher equity. Does anybody have any questions about how we chose that focus? Yes, please.
Kind of related question. I love hearing all this. This is amazing. And hopefully we can find things that work and then expand it out into teaching and learning for other groups as well. I noticed that the BAR programs mentioned the 2023 to 2026 plan.
Yep.
But not brought down to the 2026.
Yeah, it's not going away.
Okay.
It's just being reallocated into different funding sources.
Yeah, we're not carrying it anymore, but it's still, I got the message very loud and clear from our high schools that it's working really well. They're seeing it in the data. They love it. Mm-hmm. We just, when we were making decisions, when we were having conversations with our superintendent and our other decision makers, that would be better carried elsewhere so that we could use these funds in other ways.
Carly?
I don't know if this relates to kind of where you are in this discussion at this point, but one of the things that I do hear from teachers who've been in the district for a while is just the former use of Avid, and I know there were some fidelity concerns and things like that, but I guess I'm wondering how you guys feel about, that got cut with the budget cuts, and how does that differ from kind of the intervention that's happening
Yeah.
right now?
I would say, well, that occurred before our time here, but I do have experience with Avid. As an Avid district director from other districts, and it can be a really great program. I also know that it is often implemented as an overlay, not integrated into the daily systems and structures and procedures of school districts. So we chose not to go back to Avid, not because it's bad by any means, but because we know we have other areas of significant need systemically that we need to address, i.e. interventionists. Like our MTSS model is missing that, there's a gaping hole in our MTSS model, and until or unless we can fill that, Avid is just kind of an overlay and not really addressing some of our core fundamental issues.
So it feels like a Band-Aid as opposed to like addressing the underlying.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll say that both of our high school leadership teams told me that they, in theory, and I'll explain what I mean by in theory, they in theory are really excited about BAR as compared to Avid because BAR reaches every single ninth grader currently. At the end of this coming year, the dues for BAR go from like $160,000 a year to like $15,000 a year, which creates a lot more room to expand BAR. And so the hope would be that we might be able to go into then 9th and 10th graders, see how that's working, see what needs to be adjusted, and go from there so that it becomes more of like a tier 1 intervention that every student receives, but that is meant to accomplish similar study skills, academic behaviors, et cetera, that Avid was accomplishing for a smaller group. So when I talked to their leadership, they were like, we are not necessarily in support of going back to Avid, but what they're worried about is that we will give up on BAR before we have the chance to see the fruits of that labor. And I was like, well, we're not trying to do that. We want to keep BAR going. And our hope is that at the end of this year, maybe we could explore going to 9th and 10th grade or something that helps to make it feel a bit more robust at the high school level.
You were bringing up a great point, because that was another one of the challenges that was brought up about Avid, is it is a smaller focus.
Yeah,
not
and for those
as-
kids, I think it has
yeah.
a really great impact, but it wasn't reaching a ton of kids.
Yep.
And I will say this, Avid usually has two components. There's the Avid elective that hits like a particularly identified group of students, but there's also Avid school-wide, which is a very robust program, and that would be tier 1 instruction. And for reasons that I'm not aware of because I wasn't here,
Right.
I don't think we really jumped onto the Avid school-wide piece, and that was never fully implemented. Had that been maybe more fully implemented, that might have addressed some of our tier 1, but that just, for whatever reason, that wasn't the case. It was more focused on the Avid elective, and so from a systems perspective, it didn't make sense to try to go back to where we were. So we're going to try to just address our systems problems with what we currently have and then what we can see we definitely need. Thank you. Yeah.
Matt?
Just on BAR, and I guess this is my question from before too. So how do we determine as a district whether or not it's effective? Like, how do you test that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't gone into from an inferential standpoint, but I've seen some of the descriptive statistics, and the ones that the high schools are lifting up to support BAR is rates of, for instance, attendance among ninth graders varies considerably compared to 10th graders, and so you almost have this natural experiment of your ninth graders versus your 10th graders, ninth graders who are getting BAR, 10th graders who are not. They also noted number of missing assignments, which is a big part of BAR, is like being organized and having academic behaviors. Again, ninth graders versus 10th graders, it's pretty considerable in its difference. So the reason I say that those are more descriptive is you would need to do more investigation to say, well, what about BAR specifically, and not just the process of becoming a 10th grader, which we all know as you get more comfortable in high school, you might be less likely to turn in your assignments, et cetera. But they seem to feel pretty strongly that they're seeing it in data that has to do with basic academic performance and attendance. And so again, that's where in the longer term we would want to see what ways we can tie it more specifically to BAR. But I do think the data points they were mentioning were encouraging, just because I don't think our 10th graders or 9th graders are going to be that drastically different compared to some of what they were showing me in their data.
Sure.
And once we get towards the end of this year, we will have 2 different cohorts to look at. This year's
True,
cohort
yeah.
of 9th graders and last year's cohort of
Yeah,
9th
that's a
graders.
good point.
So that would be another way for us to be able to take a deeper look. It's just, we're mid-process right now, so haven't gotten to that analysis yet.
Do you want to go to the next?
Yep, are you ready to talk about
Integration?
integration?
Yep.
Okay, so again, historically, for the last 3 years, as well as part of the previous plan, I don't know well enough how far back it goes, but our goal in integration was diversifying advanced academics, which I think is a great goal in many ways, and we've seen a lot of success through the investment in young scholars in that. The inquiry that I did was able to show that Young Scholars is for the students that it serves, which is a small percentage of the population, but for the students that it serves, it is very highly predictive in whether or not it is diversifying advanced academics. So our recommendation was to say that we think that this program is having success. We think it should be something that is moving in the direction of being more a part of the general fund so that we can then use A&I funds to move on to sort of another area. So that's where you see in integration the focus of our dollars being less on Young Scholars, but Young Scholars didn't leave our budget, if that makes sense. So we are now sharing with and I don't know exactly how this looks, but with general fund, the cost of things like Young Scholars, so that we're not just dropping it and it goes away, but where we can then start putting our attention toward what I noticed as sort of one of the first glaring red flags that I saw in our data when I first came into the district and started exploring, which is that our data when it comes to discipline is inconsistent, but what data that is there indicates that we are hugely disproportionately disciplining in exclusionary ways, primarily out of school suspension, Black and brown students in the district. So the integration focus that we came up with is in year 1, really not doing a lot in intervention. It's trying to get our ducks in a row with regard to what we are measuring, how we're measuring it, how we're recording. For instance, I just in a very non-scientific way and just chatting with our 2 high schools have noted they have very different processes for recording. I don't think either process is bad, but it just makes it really hard to compare them. You know what I mean? Similarly, I think our middle schools are more on the same page, but I don't know the degree to which they're on the same page. So it becomes harder to know, is this, when we say our Black students being 3 times as likely as white students to be out of school suspended, is that accurate? It might be, but I'm not positive, right? So year 1 is really about getting our ducks in a row, understanding the nature of the problem. I don't think we are unique. This is actually the area of my dissertation research in terms of exclusionary discipline. I don't think we're probably unique in that we're probably very disproportionately suspending and employing other forms of exclusionary discipline against kids of color. And so then our hope would be to start over the second 2 years based on expertise of people at the state, in year 2, focusing on how do we create better systems of non-exclusionary discipline. So taking what we already have and doing it better so that kids are not missing learning opportunities because of an outburst that happened or something that happened in class or in the hallways. And then in year 3, trying to create better systems around restorative practices. And something that I heard a lot as feedback is that we dipped our toe into restorative practices 2 years ago in a way that people were really excited about. But something that I know from my own research is that restorative practices is actually something you tend to want to get into in year 3 or 4 after you've done a bunch of groundwork that makes restorative practices sustainable. And so that's our sort of vision on the integration goal, is getting our data right, making sure that we understand the nature of the issue, creating better systems around non-exclusionary discipline, and then creating better systems that are restorative, meaning that if a kid has a really hard interaction with a teacher or a really, really bad interaction with another peer, we're not just punishing somebody, we're trying to help repair any harm that was caused. We're trying to help create better, stronger relationships so that kids feel like this is a place where they want to be. Any questions about the integration goal?
Matt, yep.
Just 2 things. So when we're talking about exclusionary discipline, are we saying, same act, 2 different kids, different race, one gets treated different than the other?
Yes.
Yes. The dilemma is I don't even know if that's what's happening because our data is inconsistent. But
Okay.
yes, that is what in theory we are discussing.
And then what does it look like from the next step when you're, implementing some changes? What does it look like from a teacher's perspective?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, it can look a variety of different ways, one of which is, the research literature on the subject says that certain types of things that are out of a teacher's control can actually impact how a teacher addresses it, such as knowing that there is consistency at your building, right? So teachers are more likely to keep kids in class for a behavior that otherwise they might have sent somebody out if they know that there is consistency in how it's dealt with at the school level, right? So if they think that that they don't know whether or not it'll get dealt with, they'll just send the kid out of class because it's like, not my problem, right? As opposed to if they know there's consistency at the school level, they're more likely to keep them in class and deal with it in a more holistic way. So as an example, having those consistent policies, which I think some of our buildings probably are doing fantastically, others could use improvement on, is one thing. But then it also is about professional development at the teacher level of something as simple as emotional regulation when your classroom is out of pocket. You know what I mean? I use an example in a professional development I led just a few weeks ago of how once when I was a high school teacher, I completely lost it on my students. I lost my cool, lost my temper. And the next day I apologized to them. I was like, I'm the adult. I'm supposed to be emotionally regulated. And the reason I use the example is that my students who were in 9th grade at the time had never had a teacher apologize to them for the teacher's behavior. And the example that I was using was like, we actually need to be the ones regulating because we have prefrontal cortex development that they don't have. So it can sometimes be that sort of thing. And then there's other things as well, but it's at the teacher level, to your question, it can be systems above them so that they can trust the systems, and then training for their classroom so that they feel like they are better equipped to meet the needs of students.
Restorative to make an apology.
I was just like, well, I shouldn't have yelled at you guys. And they're like, we never had that happen before. So I was like, shouldn't we in 9th grade and never had an adult in your school apologize to you?
I see that we might partner with Farmington.
Correct.
Can you discuss that just a little bit? Not a lengthy description, but a little bit.
Yeah,
of
so
what
that
the
is a
goals are.
component that's required, that's another required component of your achievement and integration plan is that you have partnership, a collaborative partnership with another district. Historically, we have been partnering with District 191, and we'll continue to have connection and relation with them. They're taking their plan in a different direction where they're going to be partnering with Bloomington, focusing on Avid. And that's kind of where that partnership originated. So Farmington, they are opting into the A&I plan. I think this is their second go around with it. And so they're really looking forward to working with us, and where we're really going to focus that is on our student alliance groups and bringing them together, because that is a component, is that you actually have to bring kids from the districts together. Like that's part of that integration piece. Right.
And I'll just note that I was super impressed. I went to their, they have a leadership summit for middle schoolers that's 100% planned by their affinity group students from their high school. I was very, very impressed. I thought it was fantastic. And we had already separately been discussing ways that we could try to offer more leadership development to our affinity groups in our high schools. I was like, oh, this seems like such an easy synergy for collaboration because they already have an infrastructure. They have a system that's working. And they were like, yeah, let's do it. We could bring your high schoolers and our high schoolers together to plan, and then we could bring all of our middle schoolers together to learn. And I was like, love it. Let's do that.
And they're close. So
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah.
Easy.
Okay, do you want to talk about the third area?
Yeah.
Okay.
So our teacher equity goal, I don't know, for those of you who read the report that I sent in October, one of the biggest things that I noted is that our third goal, our teacher equity goal before, was a fantastic goal that we didn't have a metric to measure. It was about the percentage of our teachers that were using culturally responsive practices in their classroom, which sounds great, but I'm like, I don't have a way to measure that in our district, in our capacity. So the biggest thing that I have heard from folks is, our Lakeville framework has around the center of the Lakeville framework the word equitable practices, kind of going around that center. But I have found that you will get 20 different responses of what that means depending on who you ask in the district. And so our hope is to really collaborate with teaching and learning and with student services to create a stronger vision around what it means when we're talking about creating equity in our district, so that we can then do things like create a longer term strategic plan around PD, which I know teaching and learning has already been working on. And so we were like, okay, well, how can then we bring our work in equity, into that longer term planning that they're doing? Similarly, we wanted to try to figure out how we can offer clearer supports to, I've had some really fantastic conversations with our school counselors about how they can create more equitable practices from the counseling lens. But the big thing here was that we didn't have cohesiveness, and so our hope is that we can create a more highly collaborative environment between some of the departments so that we have clarity around vision, clarity around plan, so that a teacher can say, okay, I entered this year, I can see the next 3 years what my PD journey is going to be and how I can get to be where I need to be. And then lastly, we are required by the state, since the new standards of effective practice were implemented 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago? I don't remember. 3 years ago? I think they were passed 3 years ago and they went into effect 2 years ago. But those are the standards that govern teacher practice. And we've started the process of better implementing those practices or those standards into our teacher evaluation processes. But those new standards have a lot of really explicit equity requirements of our teachers that we need more support in what it means to be evaluated about, like how can our teachers effectively do them, how can they demonstrate them, and how can they be evaluated on them. And so I have heard from our teachers that they feel there's been some nervousness around, well, how am I going to be evaluated on whether or not I'm using more racially just practices? I was like, well, we need to work on better rubrics and alignment so that you feel confident that you're being evaluated in a way that's reflective of your brilliance and also that's fair. So that's sort of the goal, is a 3-year process of creating more cohesion, recognizing that we are already doing a bunch of professional development, we're already doing a bunch of coaching, we're already doing a bunch of work with teachers. This would be more about how our system can better support a teacher who is, say, new to the district or trying to figure out where they are in their journey.
Questions or Carly?
I
Yeah,
know
you're
one
smiling
in
like
the
you-
past, I'm just thinking about the previous AI plan, so I hate to come back to it.
No,
But
yeah,
one
please.
of-
It's helpful.
One of the things that we had a goal on that we actually got worse on over time was representation in terms of teachers of color.
Mhm.
And so knowing how important representation is that something you guys are?
We've had a lot of conversations about
conversations,
that,
yeah.
like a lot. And, to be perfectly honest with you, that is an eventual goal, but I would say that right now, as a district, we don't have the framework or culture where we can recruit and retain teachers of color that would like to stay. So we need to make sure that we're in a place where we know what it means to engage in equitable practices, and that we are really developing our framework around that, and we're living that, and then move into that recruitment and retention.
Yes, but we are, we are putting attention there in the short term, recognizing that we need to build more infrastructure to support, this hypothetical effort to recruit and retain more teachers of color. So for instance, something I heard loud and clear early on when I first came into the district is teachers of color feeling like they need systems to talk to one another and feel supported in what their experience as, say, a teacher of color in our schools are. And so we are starting a support sort of affinity group for educators of color that one of my colleagues is going to be leading, right? Recognizing that those sorts of efforts will then help us create the infrastructure so that if we wanted to, say, start a grow your own program, like 3 of my liaisons have told me they're interested in maybe becoming a teacher. Awesome, how can we support that? But then also, for those who then become teachers, how can we make sure that they stay in our district after we put in that time, energy, and money into training them so that they don't go to another district where they feel better supported?
Thank you. Other questions? Okay. Well, thank you both for your leadership. I feel like what I appreciate about the plan is that it has very tactical, tangible things around like reading intervention, right? And then you're also thinking about systems change work. And I think it's hard to get that all encompassed in one plan sometimes, but I appreciate that, in my opinion, that this does that. And I really appreciate, I think the whole board probably appreciates the attention to metrics and looking at strengths and opportunities in Lakeville based on the data and making decisions based on our data. So thanks for that.
Yeah, thanks. The one other thing I just want to say, because I didn't manage to speak to it, but I think it's just really important because I care a lot about their work and I see the impact of their work. When you look at our budget, you'll notice that the largest singular category of the A&I budget moving forward is the liaisons, which is 7 FTE. It's 7 people. And over and over again, when I went and I met with every district, building lead, I said, what's working and what's not with A&I? Every single building said the first thing that they said was working is the support that the liaisons offer to teachers, to students, and to their families. And I could point in a million different directions toward what that support looks like, but I think the fact that we heard that loud and clear. We also heard our elementaries say over and over again that they're not getting enough time with the liaisons, which is why we added another liaison whose sole focus is elementary this year so that we could better provide time, so that now most of our elementaries are getting somebody 2 days a week with regard to that time. I just wanted to sort of speak up in favor of just how important the work that they do is, and I see it day in and day out, and that's why we are investing, such a considerable portion there. Is that there's a host of reasons that I wanted to speak to that and honor the work that they're doing.
Great, thank you. Thank you. So this will come before the board next meeting for
24th. The 24th.
The 24th.
So 2
Yep.
weeks from today.
Yeah, that's our next meeting.
Yep.
2
Okay.
weeks. Yep. We're not going to meet next week for consideration for approval. Correct?
Yes,
Okay,
that's
great.
correct. If you do need, or anybody wants more specific information between now and then, please feel free to reach out to both of us. If you want a conversation, that is absolutely fine as well.
Thank you. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. With that, we'll turn it over to Director Holmgren for a budget update. Thanks.
Yeah, tonight we'll talk about our revised budget, which I'll bring back in full book form at the next meeting. And we sent out a handout last Friday. Did everybody have theirs, or I have some here
Yeah,
if we
packets.
need more?
Gonna pass
We'll
them
just
around.
pass them around. Okay. Now, each year, of course, we bring forward a revised budget because now we know who we've hired. We're last May and June. We have a lot of estimates in the budget. So on the first page, right on top, just gives you a quick overview of what each fund is looking like in the revised budget. You can see that the general fund, we're expecting about $3.2 to $3.3 million increase in the total fund balance, pushing that up to about $29 million. We see the student nutrition fund dropping about $151,000. Of course, this is planned. Remember, we have a little bit too big of a fund balance for student nutrition. Doing a lot of work with new equipment, new coolers, new freezers, and so forth. A lot of work over the last few years. So anyway, this should be expected. Community service fund, small increase. They're working hard to turn that loss they had here a few years ago. But about a $30,000 increase in their
COVID.
funds. Yeah.
Still
And
recovering.
then the building construction fund, you see there an increase there about almost $10 million. And that's because we've talked about it earlier this year. We're planning to do a bonding for LTFM, about $21 million. Actually, Ellers will be here next meeting to give kind of a update of where we are in that borrowing process. And we'll be borrowing those funds the end of March, about $21 million. When we look at our debt service fund, again, this is a very healthy fund. And of course, some of this is available to help us with our new borrowing. We have some money right ahead of time ready to make some payments. So that's going to help us out. Trust fund is our scholarship fund. You see, we plan to use the funds that we bring in on a yearly basis. And then our internal service fund, we'll talk in more detail here in a little bit. We are expecting at this point in time to be a little short in that fund. I know we've talked about it here the last few months and concerned about that deficit and what's going to happen to it and whether we have to cover it. I've worked with our auditors. We can borrow against the general fund, so we can borrow the money to fill the hole and then to build it back. So it's not something we don't have to just take general fund dollars and just take it and pay it off. So that's all good news. If we move down now to the second portion of that front page, I just want to talk about some of the changes in the general fund. The local other, you see about a 25% increase in from last year. Really what this is we're receiving some interest earnings that we didn't expect. We have more funds, of course, we have a fund balance now, so we actually have funds invested, so we're actually collecting some interest. So that's all good news. Our third party billing, which is for our special ed students, our one-on-one pairs and so forth, that's about a $400,000 increase from what we're used to getting. So we're very pleased with that. As you know, we've gone through working on increasing our rental rates to cover our cost when it comes to all of our buildings. That's about a $200,000 increase. And then fees, just how we collect it. Actually, most of this is coming from athletics and the actual games that go on and the fees that we're collecting. We had, anyway, another couple $100,000. So we're very pleased with that, what's happening from the year before. We look at our state sources, you see there that we're up about 4%. This comes from three places. As you know, we received 2.75% new money from the state of Minnesota. But the other pieces here, of course, we have a little bit more enrollment, so that's generating our, some more funds here also. Then we'll move down to property tax. Now here you'll see a negative number. We've talked about this the last couple of years, knowing that when the enrollment really slowed, we have to, now we've levied too much money, we have to give it back, is really what's happening here. But because we're always 2 years in advance when we're looking at our levy, that's why this kind of seems like way delayed. But that's because we levied it 2 years ago and now we're giving it back. So that's a one-time piece for fiscal 26. And our federal sources, there's a little change here, but not very much. The thing about federal sources, whatever we spend with our federal dollars, we get all of it back. So it's 100% wash. So even though you're seeing a little bit increase here in our federal funds, we're also seeing the same exact amount being spent on the expenditure side. If we move down to the expenditures, just want to hit some of the highlights here. You see under administration, you actually see a decrease in the cost of our admin. Remember, last year we paid for more than one superintendent. That's what that is. So it's coming off. We see a decrease, and we're back to where we should be. Our district support services, as you know, this past year, there was some reorganization when it came to the executive directors and so forth, so we have some more costs there than we did the year before. You see the elementary, secondary, we're up at 4.6%. This is due primarily to, of course, the increases for the staff, but at the same time, any new staff that we have. In fact, quite a few new FTEs this year. Our vocational, that's a big number, 37%. That fluctuates on a yearly basis. And when we look at our vocational, vocational dollars can only be used at 10th through 12th grade students. So sometimes we have a vocational licensed teacher that's teaching some 9th grade, and then we can't have them in this area. So the good news here is we're seeing who they are, and we're getting a better job getting reimbursed for it. Okay, moving on to special education. Here we're seeing about a 5% increase, just like we said with the rest of the staff. So this is good. We'll talk about that in a little more detail here in a minute. Community education, you wonder why is community education in the general fund? Remember, that's that unemployment, summer unemployment. Seeing a little increase there. This past summer, we spent out $63,000 when it came to just the community education portion of that unemployment. Again, that's 100% reimbursed. Instructional support services, you're seeing a little higher increase there, about 9%. That's the assistant principals that were added, deans that were added this past year. And then when you look at the pupil support services, these are new counselors we put in place, and we have a little new costs of transportation. Our sites is really all our custodial, all our LTFM, and the general fund. Not too much of a change here, so that's all good. Insurance, markets increasing yearly about 10% right now, so we really actually feel good about a little less than that, and we look at our costs. So with that quickly said, is there any questions on any of that?
Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, what did you say was the instructional support services? What does that encompass? I'm just looking at it jumping from, 12.8 million in 2021 all the way to, 23.5 million.
That's all the deans that we put in place this past year, plus the increases for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, do we not have, I mean, looking back at 2021, is that just, we've added a lot of deans since 2021? And we've doubled almost instructional support services, or are there other?
Well, there's other things we've done support-wise in our districts. I can't even think of an exact example when we go back.
Counselors go in there?
Counselors actually sit in the pupil support,
Okay.
so they're the next ones down.
Same.
And same thing there, you've seen, some pretty good increases over the year. We
Yeah.
look at support for our students, so both of these areas are there.
Okay.
CBAs and the 3 deans at the middle school.
What was the first one? A CB, what did you say?
Collective bargaining
Oh,
agreements.
thanks.
Sorry for the acronyms.
I have a question. So you're reporting here that our total revenue is projected to increase to 2.84 compared to last year, correct? And our expenditures are expected to increase 5.73, but you're still projecting our fund balance to grow by like 1.3%, right?
Yep,
Based on the last slide?
That is correct.
Okay.
If you
So-
think back to last year and the year before, our increases were close to 3%. So
Yeah.
definitely slowed
Sure,
considerably.
okay. But then if we hit this 8.3, then we're approximately 1.5% away from our policy goal,
Yes.
correct? Okay,
Yes, we're gonna hit that.
right, so by fiscal year.
You're jumping way ahead, though.
Sorry.
Yeah, you're the last page.
Oh, sorry. I thought you were, okay. Don't mean to jump ahead, sorry, Bill. Okay, questions on the first page. All right, keep going.
Okay, well, I just want to make sure we hit the highlights, and make
Yeah,
sure everybody
thanks.
understands. Second page, here we look at the expenditures a little differently. We look at an object level, so you're seeing it by, salaries and benefits and purchase service and so forth. So you'll see that our salaries and wages, up about 6%, which we talked about. You see that 12%? We have, this is a lot of insurance costs. We're seeing a lot of employees bringing their spouses onto our plan because it's such a good plan. So you're seeing a lot of increased costs there. Purchase service, about the same as last year. Our supplies, some of this hits within our building custodial budgets. And then our capital expenses, again, are about the same. Now, the 214%, remember this is in draft form, I don't want anybody to panic on seeing that number. We had found here over the weekend that we had an error how it added together. So this number that says positive $1.8 million there on the bottom is really only 822, which is practically the same number as the year before. So, and the one ahead where you see a negative 2.4, well, that number is actually 14.8. So the total is the same, but I'm sorry for the confusion there. That will be correct in the book that comes forward. So, so then what I want to do is we can look a little more detail. When you look at the next page, we put with the one with food service at the top. Again, you see the negative 151,000 in the fund balance, but when you look at their expenditures overall, it's very consistent with what they've done over the last few years. So food service, very, very healthy fund balance. It's going very well.
Can you remind us again what our maximum fund balance can be?
It's supposed to be 3 months of
3
our
months.
expenditures from the
Okay.
year before.
Okay,
And that's right about 3.5
close.
million.
Okay, great.
So we're at 3 and 8,
Yep.
and we're pretty close.
Okay,
And then community service, you see just a little more detail of where the money's coming from there. We do have a property tax piece, they get the 1.3 million. We do get some state money at 1.3 million. So it's not all fees we collect, but of course that is at 7.6. Again, a small increase in their fund balance of 30,000, working to get that out of the hole. Internal Service Fund, again, this is our estimate at this point where we think we're gonna be, and we hope it's gonna be better. It's very hard to know until we see the claims come. We don't know what it's gonna be, and we certainly were surprised last year. Really taken a weighted average here over the last 5 years to do some estimating here. But we do expect it to be a little short, get to the end of the year. Okay, now the next portion is just more details, program-wise. So you see that we have a report, which is always in the budget book, but we have expenditures by object, by program. So again, usually you kind of look forward, like, you know, if we see something 10% over, under, you know, what's going on there. So again, the superintendent's office, we talked about that one, that's a negative 40%. Instructional administration, again, the reorg in the district office, this person isn't gone, they're just in a different place, you know, budget-wise. So we don't, that savings isn't real, it's just somewhere else. School principals, they're about 8.6% change. Next page, again, this is a different administrative areas. You'll see here, it's where we shifted people over. So you're seeing a 26% increase. These aren't new people, they're just in a new place. Same with the other administrative support.
Well, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sorry, just going back to under the principals, but I'm going back a page. With the membership piece changing that significantly, is that
Sorry.
going from $76,000 to $600? Are we not covering memberships for things anymore?
I'll have to go back and look at what they spent their memberships on. Lots of times, when we look at our all of our buildings, you know, they're allotted so many funds, and they sometimes don't budget enough in a certain area. And I think this is what's happening here. So you see the budget for this year is $600. That's what they're telling me they're gonna spend $600. But you see that last year they spent quite a few dollars. So they were still within their total budget in their building, but a lot of it got spent here. But I'd have to go ask them exactly what they spent those dollars on. Okay, we get to the back page, after we get past the administration. You know, you don't see big changes. You see it under legal services. We had some large bills in '25 where we ran you know, $260,000 last year. We're running much less. We're about halfway through the year, we're at 74,000. So that budget's been dropped to 150. And then the school elections, bottom of that page, you see 109%. Well, that's because we're doing 2 elections, so it's going to be double what we usually do. I get to the next page, you see a huge number under Title II. We have some funds in Title II that have been carrying over the last few years. They haven't been spent. And all of a sudden, we need to spend them. So that's what's happening there. It's a one-time, but of course, we have these funds in hand. So it's not really a new expense. These are totally covered.
Can you explain what Title II is?
Maybe we'll have Tracy explain it.
Title II is funding that we have, and we can choose some different categories that it falls under. Professional development, mentoring is another one, so we are spending some of those funds on our mentoring program. We're also wanting to, you heard Jamie and Nicole talking about our EL teachers and supporting them with professional development. We have some funding that we're setting aside for that as well.
Great, thanks.
Okay. Another number looks kind of big. Look at that business number, 230. Again, this goes hand in hand with the vocational budget. And if they're in the business areas, because they're teaching 9th grade kids and not the older kids, so it kind of shifts around. So the way the state wants us to, of course, report it is vocational separate from some of these other vocational classes that we do in the high school that aren't technically vocational. And if you look at actually the volume of these dollars, it's not very much. Big percentage in small dollars. Okay. So we get into the next page, you see that all these dollars are pretty much behaving in the way they should. Industrial education, about halfway down the page, you'll see that -20. Again, that's tied to vocational and the business. So we're up places, down other places, but in the end, it's about the same. We go to the next page with the one with the stem on the top of the page. You see that under secondary individualized instruction, these are some new intervention dollars that we're spending. Again, these are, the total volume here isn't huge, but the percentage looks huge. But it's only a 27% increase. Additional time in summer. This is our targeted services program. We spent a little here less here this last year. In special education, you see overall we're at 5.2%, but you're seeing that the actual salary is up 1.8, but purchase service is down 1.6. So we're seeing the increase in our salaries. That's because we're getting some of our contracted people from last year replaced with employees. So you're seeing that shift. Again, community education, the unemployment, again, not $10,000 is relatively small, but it says 20%, but this is 100% covered. You look at general instructional support, again, remember we added an assistant principal, a couple of them this year.
Lake Marion and Highview.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to hit the highlights. If you have any questions, let me know, okay? We look at secondary counseling. That's where we added some counselors. You see there the increase there of 49%. Of course, that's our new employees in our school district supporting our students. And we get down to the end, you see that our increase is 5.7%. So it does bounce around every year. Things move, things are done in a different place. Sometimes we're told by the state to put things in a different place.
Go ahead, Matt, yeah.
I had a question on the transportation. It looks like it went up about a little over $800,000, 7.4%. Is that a contract increase or?
It's two pieces. The contract is increased this year of 4%. That's what's built into the contract. The other is added transportation service. Remember, we do have more students. We've got to move more students. So that's what that is. And then if you go to the last page, sorry. Here's just a little history of what's happening with our fund balance. And like I said, you can see from 23 to 24 and 24 to 25, we saw 3% increases, which was tremendous, right? It was, really put us in a good financial position. So that's slowing because of the added pieces that we put in this year. So we do expect about 8.3%. So we're not to 10 yet. Keep working on it.
Would it be fair to say that potentially, let's say it that way, by fiscal year 27, then
No.
we get another, okay.
No way.
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm just
Okay.
candidly
Yeah,
telling
no, I
you,
appreciate
I don't
that.
see a way, but we are, we are going to, as I said in our last, my last opportunity to speak to this, I mean, we're going to have to get into object and program and see what we can do about that, or shifting priorities to put money where it needs to be. But I'll stand by the fact that our long-term prognosis for doing some of the bigger things, and I've been working on this quite a bit, because we get a lot of statements in different places from different locations in the district about needs, right, and wants. And I think a while back, the major conversation was, we were talking about facilities, and then should it be integrated with a teaching and learning long-term vision plan and all that. And so I've taken that to heart. But the bigger things, like 7-period day in high school, or if we want to reduce class sizes, that has a facilities component and it has a hiring component. What does all that cost? You've asked me that before. So I'm costing all that out. I think there's been a couple of opportunities here. One that sticks out in my mind, I can't recall the art teacher's name, but I stop in her class all the time. I feel bad that I don't remember her name, but she talked about the challenges they have with how, and if you go back in history with Lakeville, we cut art and we cut music and we cut all that stuff back in 2008. And then we worked hard to bring it back. And this is as far as we've gotten. So if we want to go the next step with that, you know, what does that cost? So I've itemized all these. There's more coming. And Bill and I have been talking about, okay, when do we start having that conversation more holistically? But that's a long way to say that from a financial stance of the district, the gen ed formula is never going to get us where we would like to go. So that means operating levy or future bonds. That's the only path. And how we communicate that more broadly, I think it would be irresponsible to just throw any number out there. It should be based on some very defined priorities, and that's a collective process of trying to figure out what those are.
Okay, Carly?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always nice to see kind of that upward swing, but also to acknowledge that those big swings were related to cuts. And so the fact that I think as a board member, my personal perspective is as long as we're continuing to move in the positive direction, we can't expect these like big percentages unless we're making significant cuts, which I don't think we want to be doing at this point. We want to be growing what we're offering and keeping our staff and all of those kinds of things. Bill, the one question I did have is, I don't, maybe we talked about this before, but it's the first mention I see of the anticipated $800,000 deficit in the insurance that we're going to be taking out of the general fund, right?
Well, no, I mentioned that earlier. We can actually borrow the money from the general fund, so we're not just going to cover.
Well, there's two components to it.
Yeah.
The first is, I told Bill that we need to present this in real terms, trying and taking a 5-year, I think we took the 5-year average.
Yeah, 5 years.
And juxtapose that against what is potentially our insurance bill. It could be less.
Yeah, it could be.
But I don't think it would be appropriate to not do some sort of estimating based on some kind of real number. You know, it could be more. But I also asked him to check in on borrowing as a solution if we needed to go there. Right now we don't have to go there, but we could. Or you don't borrow and you say, you know, let's say that number lands right at 800,000. Do you deal with that through your unassigned fund balance? These are all options. Or do I cut elsewhere on our expenditures in order to avoid that problem? So there's priority of how you deal with that. But seeing it is the first part of knowing how to deal with it.
But the anticipated where we're going to be at is accounting for what, in the 8.3%, is that anticipating the $800,000 cut
It's included.
or deficit? Okay.
I guess one more point just to say on insurance. I mean, we all know that insurance is starting to squeeze us. We're going to see some big increases next year. Okay, so that's going to be something we have to put in as new expenditures that we're not used to doing. So back to trying to get that fund balance to grow, it is going to slow quite a bit, because we're going to be squeezed quite a bit.
Yeah.
Our portion of that.
Yeah.
Our portion.
Yeah, Matt?
Is some of that, you know, we're showing a second, you know, decrease essentially in that balance 2 years in a row. Is it because our fiscal year splits in the middle of the summer? And the summer is when we saw a heavy usage?
Well, yeah, summer.
Of insurance claim?
Excuse me. Summer, we usually always see some increased usage.
Sure.
Just because that's when a lot of our staff are at home and they have time and they're not taking time off to, you know, have to go to the doctor. So that's a good thing, but at the same time, it is a time that costs us a few more dollars during that period. So, but like what Michael has said, we looked at a 5-year average. So went back, you know, what's happening with our expenditures on a yearly basis and what would we really expect it to be this year. So that's what I did. And we're showing that $800,000 deficit in the fund balance. Potential. It, like I say, it could be better. We don't.
Yeah.
We just don't know, and we won't know until we get to July.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I can't imagine anyone could have predicted the 2-year swing that we just had. You know,
No, that
from
was
second
totally
plus
by
million
surprise.
to
Right.
That's just
negative.
what
Yeah.
happened.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? So this will come to next meeting as well,
Next
correct?
meeting, I'll bring this back, we'll have the budget book for you in
Great.
detail, and we'll walk back to some more pieces.
Okay, great, thanks, Bill.
So I'd just like to note too that in the budget book, because there's been a lot of conversation about how we're depicting the budget. So the last few pages on here, sorry, set my glasses down. We have the general fund expenditures by object and by program, and they're all laid out with the 25, 26 and the variance plus the percentage difference. So, I mean, that's the level of detail, reporting on UFAR's design reporting, which is our requirement for, it's the Uniform Finance and Accounting Reporting System. This is how we get audited. I just want to make sure everybody's comfortable with the fact that it's being laid out in that level of detail.
I think this is appreciated by board members. I know I like to see the categories both in dollar and percent, so.
And I think I also shared with you adjusting and showing variance in dollars for each of the object and programs as well, and we'll continue to do that for you as well. So hopefully that level of fidelity is satisfactory.
Does that work for everyone? Okay,
Thank you.
great.
Appreciate it.
Okay, last item on our agenda today is going over board procedures and protocols. So I don't think since I became chair, we haven't had an opportunity to discuss as a team like how we want to do board business together. And so I've been kind of, over the last month or so, keeping track of a number of things that I think Carly and I, as chair and vice chair, are interested in going over today. And we've consulted with Superintendent Bauman on a number of these things. Executive cabinet, like, you're welcome to stay, but
I was just
also
gonna text
if you
them to
don't,
go.
if you don't want to stay, that's fine too. So it's up to you. I
Scouts
don't mean
may
to
also-
say leave, but
Because they're scouts, you might also want to.
it's up to you. You can stay.
Stay or you've been here for a while.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for coming.
Please stay. Okay. So one of the things I was interested in just starting out with, because I know we all haven't had an opportunity to do MSBA training in particular. I don't know, Tony, if you've had an opportunity to, but I went to the MSBA conference a few weeks ago and attended phase 3 on how to build a high-performance school board team. I found these two things just insightful, and I think many of us have seen this before. But one of them was around how to build like a high-performing team. And so I thought just going over this briefly to remind ourselves kind of what MSBA recommends. So real briefly, I'll just kind of summarize this. The first one is that everybody understands our role as a board, and I think the chart below, which I know when we did training with MSBA before, articulated what the school board governs and what the superintendent manages. And that this chart helped me kind of, put into buckets like the things that we're responsible for and then what we're asking the superintendent and through his delegation to implement. Another thing around a high-performance team is that we're skilled in group leadership, that we have a high degree of trust in one another, that our interactions occur in a supportive, positive environment to the extent possible, and that we come to this table, assuming good intent, and that respect is shown for our team. The expectations for our group is very high, and that goals are stretched with each other and for the district. I feel like we have shown that quite a bit already, but just continue to push. The board is not dominated by one individual or a subgroup, and that we want to make sure that everyone participates and has a voice at this table, because we all bring different expertise and knowledge and perspectives to these issues. That we have a process for things like decision-making, which I think is our Robert's Rules, for conflict resolution and meeting management. So we have policies on some of these, but I think there is some work we can do on this topic. that we're future focused. So when we're making decisions, we're trying to think about, way out into the future, how will this decision support our long-term plans? And then that we evaluate ourselves periodically. So I just wanted to share that from the conference. Any thoughts on that, or perspectives, or things that you're like, no, we don't need to do that?
This is always good reminder centering in terms of our role. I think one of the challenges kind of coming into a board with a bunch of people that we don't necessarily know is you do have to have a high level of trust, and that's like usually you're giving trust to people to start with, but I do wonder if we can kind of work on some trust building, and some of that just occurs through actually spending time together away from the table, and obviously not doing any sort of board-related business, but just getting to know each other more. Because to me, that's how you build trust.
Yeah, we can think about that. Any other reflections?
No objections to that here.
I was surprised at the conference how many full school board teams were there together. It was kind of amazing, actually. And I think especially for outstate teams, they're excited to they travel together and stay overnight and go have drinks or whatever together. So it's kind of interesting.
So just to be clear, if we were to have an activity with the board, as long as we are not doing any sort of board-related business.
Correct.
That is okay.
Yep.
As long as it is
Right.
yeah.
Yep. We can't be discussing business.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that might be something we think about.
Yeah. Okay.
Matt, did you have something you want to say?
It's like paintball.
Oh,
Whatever, yeah, axe throwing, or, yeah, I mean, there's lots of,
That'd be fun.
honestly, I think,
I want to come to
I've
that.
never done that. I've never done that.
School board versus administration?
Yes, yeah.
Might be a thing.
Yeah, I think if people have ideas like how to build good relationships and any one of these things on how to improve, please reach out, and we want this to be effective both for our experience, but more importantly for the students and families we serve, right? So the better we're here at the table, I think the better decisions we make, and the better we do for 194. With that, I think around board communication, Carly and I have met with superintendent to talk about a couple of different avenues here. I think just a couple of reminders, and a lot of this I took from the MSBA template handbook, which I know we haven't adopted, but yeah, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, is the handbook in process?
it is in process.
Okay. Because
I
are we
think
talking
the
about
goal-
protocols that will go into the handbook?
Not necessarily, I mean, they could.
Okay.
But I think for now, it's just like, for the next year, how do we want to operate? And they could inform the handbook, but they don't have to.
Won't have a handbook for a year.
Well, no, we could have a handbook in
What's
a
going
year.
on?
The goal for the handbook is to have it ready for the next round of onboarding. So like, it will be done by
Okay.
January.
Okay.
That's less than a year.
Yep.
So not.
That's 11 months.
You know, the handbook, the MSBA template handbook is lengthy, so I'm not suggesting, we're not gonna go through all the pages from that tonight, but just some like general themes. So one of the things, and a
Paul's
lot of.
disappointed.
Some of this has to also do with that, Tony, you're like a newer-ish board member, and I don't know if you've like heard all of this necessarily, so wanting to make sure that, we can do bonding things, of course, as long as we're not talking about board business, but we do have to be careful about how many board members are talking to each other about any particular topic that will come before the board, because it could violate open meeting law. And so what is suggested by MSBA is that you try not to like have side conversations, or even like conversations where, like, if I talk to Paul and then Paul talks to Kim, that's considered a conversation amongst 3 board members, even though I'm not talking directly to Kim. And so I think just keeping mind of how you're doing business and not breaking open meeting is important, as I think we've learned that Minnesota has one of like the most strict open meeting law policies in the country. And so I think it's easy to potentially like violate it, because it doesn't take a lot to be considered a meeting. So to that end, if you have suggestions on board topics or questions that you need me to take action on, or the two of us, Carly and I together, if you could send an email to me and CC Carly, that way we're tracking what's going on. And it cannot include one more board member. So like, if like Matt emailed me and is CC Carly, it can't also include Kim, because then we have a quorum on that one topic. The only way we could do this is if like information needs to be shared, like the A&I plan that was shared, right? That can be sent to all board members so long as there's not two-way communication. So one-way communication is fine, but if there's interaction or discussion on a topic, it can only be, again, 3 board members max. So if you have suggestions on topics, send them to me and CC Carly. Carly's gonna help me keep track of things. And yeah, if anybody has anything they'd like to suggest otherwise, I'm happy to entertain it, but I would try to think like how to keep it organized.
We'll keep like a running document in terms of topics of interest, and hopefully try to bring things forward, especially those that might have multiple members interested.
Right. Similarly with emailing questions to the district office, what I think Michael has requested with consultation from us is that you can send Michael a question, if you could CC the two of us, again for tracking purposes, and then Michael will triage accordingly. So if the question requires like Tracy to answer it, he'll connect with Tracy. But what I think a challenge has been is that if we're all emailing staff members, whether or not we want them to, because we're board members, they kind of drop all their work and prioritize their response to us rather than kind of keeping on track with what they were trying to accomplish. And so this way Michael can kind of serve as referee and triage questions based on the known workload of your staff.
Yeah, well, here's what happens. If
all right.
any board member, my staff knows you're a board member. You are going to get a response or an answer, but we're also going to internally, we're trying to triage that to get it to the right place. So it is, depending on the nature of it, it can be disruptive. I would just like, if I can get it, I can streamline that by saying, you know, either Emily, make sure it gets to the right person, or I can go direct to the staff member and say, here's where it is in your priority, because I'm trying to run a district, and there's a lot of stuff going on, and we want to answer your questions. I mean, I've tried to be really diligent about that, and if you don't get an answer right away, it's not because I don't want to answer you, it's because I got to fit it into the priority, or there's some research that has to be done, and I don't want to give you a half-baked answer, because that'll just frustrate you more.
So does that process work for everyone? I think, Michael, you've also committed to, like, let's say Carly emails you a question, you'll research it with your team if needed.
Yeah, typically I'll answer everybody.
And then you'll respond back to everyone.
So that everybody has the information. Yeah. If it's sensitive or something more personal, I try to use my judgment on something like that, and I'll probably call. I mean, probably almost everybody here I've called or texted once or other. I want to be responsive and professional with your inquiries, but I also want to manage the plethora of things going on. And sometimes you don't know, we're in the middle of crisis number 4 of the day, and you're just innocently asking your question, and we can't get to it right away all the time. But I do try to tell you, I can't get to it right now, or I...
Yeah.
You're very timely.
You are.
I try to be.
I think so, too. Yeah. I think this carries over from, Matt, your practices, but correct me if I have it wrong, but I think past practice with media is that if a newspaper or news channel reaches out, either I can respond as chair or I would pass it to Grace to respond based on the topic. But I'm also happy to get input on how you would like a response, so that, you know, it's the voice of the board. It's not my opinion, right? It's the district and or the board's opinion about something. And likewise, I commit to responding on behalf of the board to all the emails that we receive, if they're addressed to the whole board. There's been a lot lately, so bear with me in getting through them all. Carly had a great suggestion for me today to put something in the emails that says, if you're comfortable with this, all board members have received your email, and I am responding on behalf of the board, so that people know, like, all 7 people have received it, and that what I'm sending is not Amber Cameron's opinion on a particular topic, but the board
That's what I used
acknowledged
to
my
do.
response, okay?
Yeah.
There is an automatic response that people receive, right? That
There
says
is. It's
something
kinda like,
like the
it's
board
been
has been
received.
received.
It doesn't seem very personal, you know, like,
Yeah.
it's like an auto response.
Well,
That's what it
but
is.
they're voluminous.
Yeah,
It's-
I know.
It's,
So, yeah.
it's respectful to acknowledge. It's not respectful to not respond
Yeah.
at the end anyway, but.
So yeah, people do receive the automatic message, I
We can
guess,
change
but-
that if you want.
Sure, okay, yeah.
Can we go back one
Beef it
thing?
up.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, with regard to also with meeting with members of the executive team, that should also be funneled through?
Through Michael,
Right.
yes,
I'd appreciate it.
Yeah.
yeah.
Professional courtesy, but
Yep.
sometimes it's personal, so I don't, I don't get too uptight about it. And I also know that I live in Reelsville, and there are things that happen. I just put it on my staff that I need to know about it. Otherwise, I'm gonna get blindsided, and nobody enjoys that experience.
So ideally, they go through you.
That'd be my preference.
Okay, great. And then going back to emails that come to us, board members you're more than welcome to respond, obviously, in addition, after I send we received your message. So if you feel like you want to, but you don't have to, obviously. Anything that you want being done differently with any of those things?
Well, media inquiries can be very sensitive,
Mhm.
depending on what's going on. Typically, if there's a media outreach to a board member directly that we haven't received at the district, and my most recent experience with Matt is he's been very good about, like, hey, this is going on, and sometimes I know, sometimes I don't know, and it's good to be coordinated on a response, because I would not like to be put in a box that I can't get out of. And I'm certainly not going to usurp a board member's authority or position on a sensitive topic. So the more coordinated we are, the better. Typically, the board chair responds to media if there's a response from the board, but that's internally coordinated, I would assume. And then we would need to know as administration, because somebody's going to come to us and say, what about this or what about that? So
Yeah.
the more coordinated we are, the better. The trick is, and sometimes you have to drop everything and deal with it, because it can be very sensitive and very high profile, right? And I can think of the times in COVID when that happened. I can think of times when the incident with George Floyd occurred. There's things like that just are really big. And they're even bigger than all of us, frankly. And we want to be responsive to our community, so I just tread carefully around media, and let's stay coordinated.
Yeah.
I think the goal is to not get into it if we didn't have to.
Correct, yeah.
Right. Okay. Then similarly, when we're interacting with public, I think we have our day-to-day encounters, right, with stakeholders that we're talking about issues, and so to the extent if you learn about things that would be helpful for decisions, obviously bring that into the conversation from people that you're talking with. We also, because of the data dashboard that has been developed and continues to be, or is continuing to evolve, we think it's important that we're thoughtful about how things are shared from that for non-public facing information. So there are things in the data dashboard that we don't put on a website or we don't share in media, and so I think it's important to be conscious of that, and that while we have the ability to look at that data, the board should make a decision whether or not that data goes public through like presentations or conversations that we have with individuals. Because I don't think that was the intent of the data dashboard, was to take the data and then share it. And so I think thinking about our process and how we want that to look.
Yeah,
as a group.
the data dashboard, Amber, that's a good point. It was really put together for us to make decisions, identify issues, and to change policy, change whatever we needed to change as a board, right?
Yeah, okay.
I guess I'm curious as to what your thoughts are. I mean, what you mean, like, if someone's just like saying, like, what's the concerned use, I guess?
I think,
and I think we, just as an example.
Yeah.
And we did talk to Michael, and I can't remember if Tracy was involved. So we did a presentation, Brian and I did, like showing other school board members some of the data dashboard, like, hey, this is what you can do, you know, for the benefit of them looking at expanding their data metrics.
And was it our private data, you mean, that was shared?
Well, so none of it's private technically, it's all
or
public data.
non-public facing?
Well, yeah, you can't get on the dashboard, but the data is all available publicly. So anybody can request the data. No personal identified information or identifiable information is available to us through the data dashboard. It's all metrics, you know. So just to show people like, hey, these are the different categories. I assume that's not what you're talking about, but are there specific concerns, just so I understand what you mean?
I have concerns about the level of data that we have access to, when I sent you an email about it when we were looking at the data dashboard, because I don't think that we should have metrics down to comparing this second grade classroom to that second grade classroom, to this elementary building to that elementary building. I'm comfortable with board members knowing the average or the overall, like, this is how second graders are doing within our district. But when it goes down to comparing against another elementary school, that puts administrators in a tough position. When it goes down to looking at, well, I can see how this second grade classroom is doing in comparison to that second grade classroom. Again, I feel that goes into the administrative lens where it puts our teachers in a bad light too. Like, we don't have all the information about what goes into leveling that classroom, or what is in each specific classroom, or the population that's in each specific building. And I think that data can be interpreted and it can negatively impact relationships within our administration and within our staff. That's just my opinion on it. I don't think we need that level.
Well, I think it's a different question. I guess my question is on the use of it.
Yeah, I think it's important that data is presented in context, right? And so I would never want us to get in a situation where we're just holding up a slide on, you know, how a school is performing and saying, like, look at this second grade level at this school compared to this second grade level at this school, and saying one is doing better than another, without knowing the student demographics. So that, like, we just had this conversation, right, about the EL populations. Maybe one is a higher EL, or special ed students, or there's so much context that goes into that data. And if it's presented out of context, I think it can set, I think that it can mislead the community to thinking bad school, good school, without
bad
context.
teacher, good teacher.
Or teacher at that level.
Yeah.
The other side of that, though, and I know some of these discussions took place when we were talking about putting the dashboard together. The other side of that is, you know, are there aberrations? And that was one of the reasons that we were looking at a data dashboard. If all we're looking at is an average all the time, average all the time, average all the time, are we really seeing aberrations? And when, gosh, I think that started last February, a year ago. February, this is February, a year ago, we started conversations on that, and that's part of what we were looking at, or attempting to look at. Are there aberrations, good aberrations that we might want to duplicate, or bad aberrations as to, okay, what needs to be, can the board do anything to help this bad aberration? And can the board do anything to, you know, bring forward a good aberration? So, I know we don't want to get down to, you know, Mrs. Smith in second grade at you know, Lake Marion is doing, you know, I don't think we need to get down to that, but we do need to get down to grade levels and even between schools. And I think part of that is what I hope we'll eventually see with the data dashboard.
I guess I would disagree with you on that, just based on the fact of what is our role as a board. Is policy, we talk about curriculum, and if we're talking about curriculum, we're setting the curriculum for all second graders within the district. That's our role, right? But then it's the administrator's role to make sure that that curriculum is implemented with fidelity. And that would be the level of detail that you're discussing. Like, well, this would be like a one-off, what's going on in this building? Like, what is that teacher that's doing so great? Or what is this going on? The implementation of curriculum is that.
Yeah,
We set the curriculum, they implement.
But I would suggest that without knowing the things I was mentioning, how can we as a board, how can we as individuals on the board, if Tracy comes to us and says, I need this curriculum, this is why, okay. If we don't understand the aspects of, and I'll go back to just using the term data dashboard again. If we don't understand those pieces, how can we make a decision, an appropriate decision for Tracy or anybody in regard?
Because we're looking at the grade level as a whole.
Yeah, but
I mean, that's what we're looking at, is
Yeah.
how second graders are doing, because that's where we are responsible to the state. Like, we have to report back to how our students are doing at specific grade levels on our state standards. Like, that's what as a district we're responsible for. So we don't need to know the detail, like, that's what they do.
I was just gonna say, I feel like our role is systems level work, right? And that the goals that we set with the metrics was around large, what's the word? Like looking at a metric at a macro level. So we want to move second grade X percent, right? Or, well, actually, I don't think we even did by grade. We want to move students by X percent. And so for me, the data that we need access to then to make those decisions is at the macro level, and at the building level or the district level staff are the ones to decide what levers need to be pulled so that that macro data continues to improve. I don't think it's the role of the board to legislate how like a resource or a strategy would be implemented in a particular school at a particular grade, but our job is to make sure the overall system is heading in a positive direction.
Yeah, and Amber, I'm not suggesting that we manage a second grade class in an elementary school. Mm-hmm. What I'm suggesting is, Bill showed us $200 and some $1 million budget, and millions of dollars go into curriculum, millions of dollars go into other resources, okay? We need to understand below a macro level what's going on. If, again, I'm going to use the word aberrancies. If there are aberrancies, good ones or bad ones, so that we can help make decisions. I mean, it's part of our decision-making, not managing. Okay, let me be clear about this, Amber. I'm not suggesting the board should manage a second grade class in Lake Marion. What I am suggesting is the board should have enough information, i.e. objective data, to help make decisions on whether it's Tracy's curriculum issues or programs or whatever the next thing is. So anyway.
Do you think we could agree to that having that level of access, I think it's at the building school grade level, right? I forget where we're at. Is something that we can utilize to make informed decisions, but that is not intended to be a public-facing document?
I've never,
No,
okay.
I know. I think that's the issue.
That's a different,
Yeah.
to me, that's a totally different question than what I'm discussing here.
Sure.
I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
that we should put a billboard out there with, I mean, that's our information to
Right.
know.
So
Yeah, I'm
we could like commit to that?
Yeah, I'm not
Yeah,
suggesting we
sorry.
should run around town.
Yeah, no, and I think we are talking about two different issues.
Yeah.
I mean, we kind of strayed from your
Yeah, so I
initial
think
question.
staying on where we
But
just left off.
Can I just add my 2 cents? And
Yes.
it kind of goes, I mean, these are tools to evaluate the performance of the superintendent, which is what our job is. It's not just policy. The board is perfectly fine, apparently, of micromanaging the budget and looking down at every line item. Why not education, right? I think especially when we're looking at the data that's available publicly, the standardized test scores, and we see it dropping, for 8 years in a row, we should be asking those questions.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Yeah.
And then, like, talking to Jamie, like, I want to know what programs we're spending money on that are effective and are not effective, and what we're changing to be more effective as a district.
Yeah.
So some of that, again, like Paul was saying, if we're looking at one second grade team is just crushing it over here and another one's not, like, okay, and it's just even asking, being able to acknowledge it and ask the question, Superintendent Bauman, are you talking to them? Just to be able to ask the question to say, hey, what practices are they doing over here that we can maybe replicate? Sure. Or what additional resources need to be allocated to this other second grade team?
Yeah.
So.
And I think we all want to do that. I think, it's
Well,
straight.
I think that's the job of Tracy to be presenting, not to put a job on you, Tracy, but like, Tracy would provide a summary level data of like, what are the trends that we're seeing, especially like, these are our goals for the metrics. Are we moving toward that or not? Where are we seeing? So I actually don't agree that we're getting down to, I would expect Tracy and team to be getting down to where are we seeing those really great things happening? What are some challenges or barriers that are coming up and how are we going to address them? And that then she comes to the board saying, given XYZ, this is what we need from the board. This is what I'm recommending.
Yeah.
Like these resources, these interventionists that we put in place are doing amazing things, or we need more liaisons because they're doing amazing things. Like that's where I feel like seeing the data and the trends and going in the direction we want them to go in is what we expect, and that's the information we use to evaluate the superintendent. But I'm not going to be getting down into comparing the different classrooms because I have no idea what's going on in those classrooms. So to your point about like, I don't think the point is for us to be sharing out. Can we share out, hey, our district, our school board is doing really great things with regard to establishing this data dashboard. Here are the different metrics we're looking at. I think that's fair. Like we're looking at, graduation rates. We're looking at, but I don't think we should be sharing out our non-public facing data, as you say.
So
And Matt, like-
there's consensus kind of with that.
I think we're okay with that. I don't think we're saying we should be
Great.
putting that stuff out in public.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I completely agree with
I think that
that.
just needed to be.
But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be asking the questions and trying to dig down and find out what's going
absolutely.
on. And
Well,
looking at that data to make decisions.
I go back to I agree with Carly, like, I don't think we should have level access down to the grade level. I understand what you're saying, but there's two faces to that conversation. So yeah, I mean, the conversation could be, this is so amazing what this team is doing over here, but then the other conversation and the other side of that coin is, well, what's wrong with this classroom and why isn't that teacher doing that? And then why is this building doing better than, I mean, you can still, there's two sides to that coin, like, and it opens up a conversation that, again, as board members, that's not for us to decide. Like, we don't have any of the information about like how the evaluation system is in place for that, or what coaching has happened with those individuals, or what that building principal, like what their goals are for the year and what they're working on. I just think like that's administration's job, and I just think it puts us in a place where that's a dangerous conversation to have as a board, I think.
I think we all expect not to talk about you both, but expect administration to be doing that work, right? Looking at the data, using the data to make informed decisions about how to improve at a grade level, building level, and even at a teacher level, right? So that is an expectation. That's, I mean,
It's
I know
an
you're doing
expectation, but
Yeah.
I mean, in a district where we're already struggling to fill positions, like
Yeah.
if I was a teacher and I was coming to this district and I knew board members were having conversations based on my classroom versus another one, I would take that into consideration when I applied.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I think it seems like we can all agree that the non-public facing data, at the moment we have access at building grade level.
Right.
But that is not intended to be shared publicly with the public.
Yeah, Amber, I don't think anybody's debating that.
Okay.
Nope,
Yeah,
nope, I completely agree with
Okay,
that.
great, okay. Regarding meetings, we're gonna return back to doing like one regular business meeting a month and a work session a month, so we can hash things out, like in this format, and then with the hopes of the regular meetings, you know, being the time where we can approve and ask final questions. Something else Michael and I have discussed is adding back a board communication section at the beginning, where it doesn't have to happen every meeting, but it's an opportunity, like if we're getting a lot of emails about a particular topic, like boundaries or the settlement with the teachers, we can provide like a statement about what's happening and just acknowledge, or in public comment if we wanna, you know, we had a lot of people talk about something, at the next meeting we could follow up on that. And so it's kind of a placeholder to just allow for updates to happen, and Michael might do it sometimes, or I'm happy to do it. So if you have ideas of what you want the board to communicate out on these types of things, happy to include items.
So separate from like a board member reports?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I
Announcements
feel like
from
board
the
members'
board.
report is more like, what have we participated
Mhm.
in? And this is more like a response to, or an update on things that have been happening that aren't a formal agenda item, but
Sure.
just to, Brian brought this up, for example, when we were getting a lot of emails from teachers, and he thought it'd be a good idea to give an update on where we're at with negotiations, and so
Mhm.
that was kind of the thought, is like have a placeholder so that we have it on the agenda. It doesn't always have to be used, but
Sure.
yeah,
It is
so-
part of the script, like we say that we'll follow up
Yeah.
later and we never do, so.
Okay.
Well, I would say that, I think the script says that
Someone will.
board or administration,
Yeah.
and we typically grab those and respond.
Sure, okay. For some things, we might try, it might not be listed officially, but I might try to set some time parameters. So like, you know, maybe in the next 20 minutes, we can get through this item, or, you know, whatever might make sense. Of course, if we need more time, we can do that, but I would really like to avoid 3-hour board meetings when I feel like a lot of what members want to say has been already surfaced. And my goal is like to make every board member feel like their perspective and voice has been heard to inform the decision, but not necessarily to like to belabor things over and over again. So we'll kind of take that how it may, and some things need more time, of course, than others, but trying to be mindful of efficiency
And that was
combined
something-
with discussion.
And that was something that when Kim was chair for a period of time, we had that in place. And
Yeah.
I think the, what I would say is every board member needs to be mindful of like, if we have 10 minutes and we do want everybody heard, that we make sure that everybody has time for input.
Yeah.
Right, and if it got to be like a super long discussion, we just said, we're gonna move this to the next agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Are people comfortable having public comment at the beginning of the meeting still? Or would you prefer it at a different time?
I like it at the beginning.
Are you guys okay with that? Okay. And then I think you normally discussed, is it still okay to record public comment? There was a time where it went off recording because it was just so contentious, but just confirming that everyone's comfortable, not when we've been on the board, but prior to us, that we're all comfortable with it still being recorded? Okay, great.
Yeah, I think it has to be part of our meeting. Per policy.
Public comment was part, so yes.
Yes.
If we weren't comfortable with it being recorded, we would have to move it to before.
Like before,
Yeah.
which you did, right?
Yes.
Or someone did?
We did
We
for the
did.
first
You were on
2
the board?
years.
Okay.
Yep.
But if you want to approve any policies, it has to be at, the first and second reading have to be
Right.
where public comment is offered at the meeting.
Right, yep. Okay, Tony made a good suggestion to me, just as we were eating Jimmy John's together before this, unplanned, we happened to be there together. So, technically, following Robert's rules, when we have a recommended action, we should first take a motion on that item, and then have discussion, and then vote. Right now, we're doing like discussion, then the motion comes, then we're doing more discussion, and then we're voting. And so I feel like it'd be nice to get to, on recommended actions, a motion is made, and then we discuss, and then we can say, vote yes or no to that motion, and maybe it fails, maybe it.
Yeah, there's 2 things about this. First off, last week,
I noticed at one point, we had discussion, then we made the motion, and then we talked again on the same thing for another 20 minutes. And it was like, okay, we're spinning our wheels here, we're just doing the same thing over and over again. I was like, this is redundant at this point. And then the other thing I thought is that by doing it this way, you're focusing specifically on the motion that's on the table as opposed to the broader themes and the grand ideas that are outside of that scope. And so it focuses the discussion a little bit better. Now you can still, offer, amendments, you can still, withdraw it, you can still put it on a table, you can still do all sorts of different things with it, but you're focusing just on the business that's in front of you as opposed to everything outside of that. And that was, one of the ways everybody's done the business here, and I'm coming in as the last one here. It's pretty informal. I mean, you guys do a really good job of just maintaining the direction and the structure of the meetings. You don't need a parliamentarian. You just, you're very informal as far as you're doing things. But one of the disadvantages of that is that you end up doing, spinning your wheels and having those 3-hour meetings because of it. And so I think just kind of getting to business, I mean, kind of focusing on what's in front of you as opposed to everything outside of that might speed things along a little bit better.
Well, I would add too, if we do have this goal of our work sessions are where those are gonna be our longer meetings that we are hashing out, and the ideal is then end of month meeting. There can still be additional discussion, but it's mainly like, we've hashed out our things, it's time to do our business and move things along. So I think historically I've seen wide variety of that, but it would be good to get, ideally, if we could get back to that, that would be helpful.
The one challenge that might come up with that, and I think this is what happened last week, was something removed from the consent agenda, where all of a sudden now it's, okay, discussion on consent agenda item, and then is there a motion to approve the item? You know? But otherwise,
you can make the motion first, motion to approve, then discussion, and then it could be voted yea or nay. Do you know what I mean?
I'm just thinking about how it's structured on our agenda items typically. I think because I think the motion is, I want to remove this for discussion.
Yep. Okay.
Or the request rather.
I can
It's
look
not
at
a
that.
motion.
Okay.
I think if you set the precedent that a board member contacts you in advance, if they have an item that they want to remove from the consent agenda for discussion, then you would prompt it differently. You would just say, you would ask for that.
Yeah.
Whereas if nobody had said anything, then you're just asking for the motion to approve the consent agenda.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. Okay. Scheduling. A question for the group, and it can be different for individuals if need be. I think we're struggling to get responses from people on, and you may have experienced this too, on what people can participate in. So for example, on the 21st, there's the Arts and Activities Festival, and Community Ed has asked us to be greeters. And I've heard from some people and not others, what is the best way to nail down people if they can attend? Email's the current mode.
I just respond to the calendar invite.
Yeah.
Or calendar, people can do calendar, and I'm happy to text too if that's helpful. I don't want to bombard people.
I didn't respond to your email because I'd already responded on the invite.
Okay, so either use front email, calendar invite, and if I don't hear from you in one of those, are you okay if I send a text? Should that be okay. I just don't want to
But
miss
ideally,
anyone.
Ideally, people respond to their email, right? So that you're not.
That'd be
having
great.
to-
Yes, if possible.
And ideally, people are responding to Kim Ellison's email.
Yes,
Right,
it's
yeah,
normally from
that's
Kim. Yeah.
the calendar invite, yeah.
Because I think that isn't necessarily the work that I want you to be doing.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you can also establish a default, right? If the method of notification is through the calendar, then that has a green check or an X. Or if it's email, a non-reply means you're not attending. And have a standard so that people aren't burdened with it. But I can also tell you that if you don't agree to that and execute on that, then people are going to get upset saying, well, I didn't know. it was going on.
Yeah.
I didn't get an invitation.
I think the only tricky part is like, for this one coming up, I think our calendar invite is for the whole day, but we only need shifts of people, and so we have to just figure out that, how, this seems so minor, right, but it's also like something that's taking up a lot of time.
You say yes, and you
It
say
shouldn't.
yes, in your reply, you say, I can be there from this time to that time.
Okay, so you can make a comment in your RSVP?
Yes, you can make a comment
All
in
right.
your RSVP. You
Everybody,
certainly can.
everybody needs to get up
We
to
have the
speed with,
technology.
technology. We need
Okay.
a lesson on the technology.
Okay, so it's a 3-mode, like calendar invite, if that doesn't work, email, and if that doesn't work, text. Is that good? And I know people can't come to everything, right?
Yeah.
Of course. To that extent, I think similar to policy committee, I think Carly and I are interested in like sunsetting public engagement committee for now. Just because we have so many events that we're invited to that Kim Elson's argument, which I thought was a good one, was that is a lot of public engagement that we're not even at all those things yet. And so to the extent that we can fulfill those with 1 or 2 of us attending, we can see what gaps there are with groups. And of course, if any community member or group ever wants us to attend something or meet with them, they should definitely connect with one of us, and we will do that. But just in terms of like having another committee, I don't know at this point if that's needed. That's kind of your thought, right?
Yeah.
Spring is busy.
I
Yeah.
just think, we're busy with a lot of things.
Okay.
And if people have ideas, bring them forth.
Okay.
And then I feel bad if I take those.
To that point,
I was there by myself.
we won't hash this out today, but this is, I think, where we left off on the committee assignments for the school district from 2025. And so I'll send out with this an email, including, there's this like kind of table that describes each of the councils and committees. But if you're interested in doing a different committee, even if someone else's name is attached to it, if you'd let me know and we can figure out who would like to cover them. I think it's nice to rotate whenever, if people are interested in that. So just because you're slotted for something doesn't mean you need to stay there. Yeah, are there any questions right now on this? This is more like homework to take with, and I'll send it to Brian too. But I think ideally, like we're splitting this more or less evenly.
The chair usually does AMS.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think this has been changed like since 2026, but like I think ideally, we're representing all of these groups and the work is more or less evenly divided. Some of these councils meet a lot more frequently than others. And so in the grid or in the matrix I'll send out, it kind of talks about that and the commitment that would be required. But I think ideally we'd have one person assigned to each thing, but you can see like on some committees we've had more than one person interested, so I think 2 is fine. So any questions on that? Otherwise I'll just send this out for homework. Okay. And then.
So we'll talk about this at like the next work session?
Yeah, I think next, because I
Or
think
next
it's getting
meeting.
late. What?
Next work session?
Yeah, I think not the board meeting, but work session, yeah. And then, likewise with training, I had Kim Elson run a report on the training that the board has done through MSBA. And I think there are 4 of us that need phase 2 training, which is the school finance training. And so a question for I'm included in that, for the 4 of us in that boat, we could either look at having MSBA come and do a training, like I know we had phase 1 come and do a training for the full board. We could do that and just the whole board could be invited, or only the 4 of us that need it would be at it. Or I also asked MSBA this week, but I have not heard back yet when their next virtual opportunity for that training is. And the reason I'm focusing on phase 2 is that all board members in the state of Minnesota should have phase 1 and phase 2 training to serve on the board. It doesn't specify when you have to have it done, but that's the goal. So I don't know if their preference is to like a group training for phase 2, or whenever the virtual is, people tap in if they're available. I don't
I
have
think
a
group was good.
preference.
I think it may have saved us money last time to do it all at once.
It what?
Same price.
I think it's about the same price.
Was it?
Yeah, I think so.
It's generally better though. I know I might
To do it
even-
together?
Yeah, I might even show up just as like a,
Okay.
I guess that adds money.
We can have Kim look at costs.
Maybe I won't.
We can have Kim look at costs, and it could be scheduled like during one of our work sessions, so we don't have to add another meeting potentially, but, yeah. Are there other things that people wanted to talk about regarding like our procedures or protocols or communication style? Okay. Are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, sorry.
Okay, no, you don't have to apologize for thinking.
I didn't mean to raise my hand, I was scratching my head.
Okay, with that, I guess we'll adjourn, and we'll see each other in 2 weeks.
24th.
Yeah, 24th. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. What?
Oh, we're in a first, we have to make a.
Yeah, there's no, we didn't.
Work session.